across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome. It is the home of Common Sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Man, we've got a lot to get through here. That announcement, of course, from Keir Starmer planning to raise minimum social media age to 16. This will be enforced through facial recognition and digital ID checks, though many have already dismissed it as unlikely to work given the widespread use of VPNs. And that's just one area where somebody could circumnavigate the government system. Details to come. Also, Nigel Farage has published a sweeping essay declaring Britain a two-tier state and very much against white people, vowing to abolish the Equality Act as it emerges. Taxpayer-funded employment schemes worth hundreds of thousands of pounds are legally excluding white applicants across the country. What is going on? More on that story to come. And the US and Iran have formally agreed a framework peace deal to be signed, with Trump announcing the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Hurrah! And oil prices already tumbling nearly 5%, though experts warn it could take months before supplies fully normalise. We'll bring you all of those stories and more, and of course breaking news as well. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through here this afternoon. Do you support this social media ban? It's an obvious question, but it's all enveloping in many respects given the facets there are to this story. So it was about 8 o'clock this morning when Keir Starmer hopped out of bed and jumped straight into a press conference and said this.
Today, I can announce that the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16.
Under the age of 16, ban all social media. Yeah, all those words, government saying we're going to ban something. You should always be a little cautious. But this is one of those subjects that we all get. Now, we differ on how to resolve it. I understand that. The UK's decision to ban social media for under 16s is one of those rare political moments where almost everyone seems to agree that something has gone badly wrong. I mean, after all, we're not talking about kids watching cat videos anymore. That's long gone. We're talking about, in the worst cases, cyberbullying, self-harm content, eating disorder communities, sexual exploitation, grooming gangs, blackmail, revenge pornography, live-streamed abuse and algorithms that can drag a vulnerable teenager into a dark rabbit hole faster than you could say terms and conditions. Some kids have literally taken their own lives. You heard the story there with Julia, and sustained online harassment. That is the grim reality driving the policy. Let's have a listen to what Keir Starmer said on some of those specifics.
Social media is making children unhappy. It's making it easier for bullies to harass and abuse them. And it could even be harming their mental health, exposing them to content that is dangerous, because that's what grabs the attention. It's designed to be addictive. Features like the infinite scroll, they're designed to lock you in for hours.
So there it is. We all understand the problems. Politically, for Starmer, it's quite a clever move in a weird way, because 90% of parents actually back a minimum age of 16. This was during the government's consultation. Of course, they did speak to, I think it was over 100,000 parents in this. It makes opposition difficult for any mainstream party to say, no, I don't want things to be safer for kids. But here's the problem. Teenagers are remarkably inventive creatures, of course. Tell them they can't go onto a platform, and many will simply find another way, borrowing a parent's account, fake their ID age, use a VPN, or migrate to some other obscure corner of the internet that is less regulated. Critics argue that the ban risks treating the symptom rather than the disease. This allows social media companies to escape scrutiny for the addictive algorithms and harmful content they created in the first place. So perhaps the real question isn't whether kids belong on social media, but whether social media in its current form is fit for children at all. Now, I would always argue it's adult content. I mean, most of the stuff is adult content. Just very briefly, And I'll tell you what this was about in a second. Over the weekend, I was looking at a set of conversations probably involving about 50 people piling in to one discussion. The level of threats and insult were off the scale. It was awful to watch this. Threats of violence, threats of sexual abuse, the F word used probably 200-300 times in just a matter of minutes. The C-bomb was also dropped with alarming regularity as well. It was horrendous to see humans chewing bits out of each other in this way. And what do you think they were discussing? A by-election. It's like, hang on, what, a by? Yeah. So just that. Something about the platform of social media. It's not even about the anonymity. Some of these people happily put their biogs up there despite the extraordinary language they would employ. And this is just adults, OK? This is so it's an adult forum, really. I don't want my kid to see that. And that's the fairly innocuous stuff in comparison to what can happen with self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, mental health problems. I mean, it's a pretty grim place. And, of course, we're not fundamentally talking about Twitter, because kids mostly are not on Twitter. They love a drop of Snapchat, maybe pushing into Instagram, and a few other forums thrown in as well. What platforms or forums will this include? We await the full list. 0344 499 1000. So we all agree it's grim out there. I think we can all agree this is adult content. I've no idea why the likes of Musk and Zuckerberg feel the need. What is it within them as grown men that they want to facilitate the desires of paedophiles, sex offenders and violent, horrendous elements of the human gene pool? I don't know why. I mean, if you said to... I mean, their thinking is, well, anything goes. Anything goes. It's up to individuals to police themselves. OK. I mean, where do we take that? Can we do that? Just get rid of the old bill, I suppose. Anything goes. Police it yourself. 0344 499 1000. Do you support the social media ban? Of course, to me, the most sinister aspect is when I hear a government say, we are going to ban something. I get the judders at that point. And is there such a word as judders, we could ask. Let's speak with Harrison Allman-Varty, leader of Reform UK at Elmbridge Borough Council. Harrison, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. You are, obviously, age-wise, you're over 16, but, you know, you're still a young guy. What's your initial take on this?
Yeah, you know, I'm not going to completely bash Starmer on this because I do think he has come from the right angle. I don't think there's any sort of malice intent with this. I think when you hear some of the stories that the parents have told, it makes you want to react in a way that will obviously defend them and try and see what can we put in place to prevent that from happening. Whether or not a blanket ban is the answer, I'm not so sure, only because, like you touched on then, the nature of a 15-year-old, I think they're a bit naive to think that they will just accept, oh, that's it, I can't log into my TikTok or Instagram anymore. They'll find a way. And obviously the route that child will take is a VPN. Now, the problem with that is when you go onto certain VPNs, obviously you're now no longer in the mainstream, and actually now you're really in the Wild West. So it's a case of, okay, well, what could they be exposed to then? I think the answer to this, obviously, there's a lot of talk on the state, but and year by year, it's more and more, what can the state do, whether it's breakfast clubs or whether it's this. But it's a case of, well, what about the parent, right? We need to, don't get me wrong, every parent has the best interest for their child, but we need to make sure that, you know, there is still as much emphasis on the parent on this. So I think being able to implement controls on the parent side, so the emphasis is on them. If the parent is concerned about what their child is seeing, they should have the power to set limits on that device, okay? But also, these social media giants like Instagram, I mean, these debates have been going for a long time, but there needs to be more accountability from their end. And I actually do think, weirdly, I think this country is so overregulated. But the one area where we do need to regulate it with some teeth is this domain, because it's a case of, I feel as if social media companies don't feel as if there's any consequence, where if they do see something, a 15-year-old should not be able to search up and witness self-harming content or extreme eating habits or whatever it might be. So part of that is to do with social media. There's an in-between bit. What I think will be interesting is how does Starmer square it in front of Trump or Van, whoever's at the G7 coming up, because we know that they are massively against this, and obviously there'll be a lot of special interest.
What do you think, Harrison, is the? I mean, bearing in mind most of this stuff, not all, but most of it is. These are platforms for adults, essentially. Certainly Twitter, and you could argue Facebook, and and Instagram was never something. I remember when Instagram came out, nobody really thought that this was something for kids. But it's sort of become that because all sorts of elements and businesses and companies and organisations, bands, if you want to look at it from a popular culture perspective, TV show, films, all the innocent stuff, they've obviously all got accounts on those places as well, and they want the fan base to follow them. So it's sort of, I suppose, developed a life of its own, and nobody really knew how to stop it, and nobody wanted to stop it. And that's really the contention of the likes of Zuckerberg and Musk, that, look, these are mostly forums and formats for adults. If you don't want your kids to see it, don't let them on it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, to be honest, there's a part of me that also thinks that someone will always find their fix. Whether it was smoking, now it's vaping. With this, Keir Starmer has not decided to ban, for example, a competing site of Twitter, which is that Blue Sky, right? Which is not obviously as popular, but it's weird because obviously people will feel vacuumed. You look at, for example, I don't know, a child playing a game where they have voice chats on that. You will hear some of them. When my older brother used to play those games when I was, I don't know, 12, and he was a bit older than me, I heard some of the most horrendous stuff when you killed someone that you weren't supposed to kill in that game, and you're hearing some random person in your ear. So, unfortunately, the world we're living in is a case of they are just going to be more exposed to that. Well, it's a really hard line to tread, but I do think that they should really be consulting with the likes of Zuckerberg and Musk to find the intermediary, the middle point here.
I mean, would the easier way around it, bearing in mind we're talking about AI, its capabilities, which are kind of off the scale, that you would just have an algorithm that wouldn't allow... So I know things can get caught up in algorithms that weren't intended to be, but I mean, it's just social media, who cares? But couldn't you say, right, OK, there's going to be we'll have no suicide content on this site, we'll have no self-harm content on this site. The algorithm will be so good, and I refuse to believe that the algorithms to do this are not already in place, or they haven't got the capability. Of course they can. Artificial intelligence is, growing literally by the hour. Would that not be the best way, just to get rid of the bad stuff, and then anyone can go on it?
It seems so. I mean, I'm sure they will be already harnessing it. But for example, me, I'll submit a 700-page planning document to ChatGPT to help me understand it, and it will read it within 5 seconds. It could scan through massive amount of content.
True.
Undoubtedly, AI will have a play, but I personally don't think this will stay. It is my prediction. I think he'll buckle. It'll be one of his many U-turns. And I actually do think a buckle to the pressure of the US, because we know how aggressive they can play. Yeah,
I was going to say, I mean, the arguments, because if you say to somebody, do you want your kids to see suicide videos, beheadings, people having the crap smashed out of them, and all manner of other sort of nefarious content where it's just sexual or violence or otherwise. I mean, everybody's going to go, well, of course I don't want my 12-year-old to see that stuff. But simultaneously, what is a genuine concern, this is my biggest concern about this, is governments banning stuff. You set this precedent, you open this big door, you can put digital ID into this, which many people are arguing, not unreasonably, that this will become
and also, Ian,
an obvious way to implement it.
Someone who called in earlier was saying, well, what happens if you have a child born in July and someone who's born in, December? You've got to have half the year who is on social media and half the year who isn't. And actually, half that year you'll be able to buy cigarettes or whatever it is when they turn on. And then it doesn't really work.
Yeah, there's going to be stuff like that. And does this set, what's the next step after this ban on under 16s? Do we say that we don't want, over 60s seeing certain things because it's too triggering for them, because they're of a different era, or over 70s or something? I mean, where do we go with this? If we start giving governments green lights, I mean, I don't like the idea that governments ban stuff. And this might sound as if it comes from a good place. And maybe it does. I mean, we're not really in the habit of congratulating Starmer too often.
With that argument, you could say, all right, well, let's just make the speed limit 10 miles per hour everywhere. You
remove all risk.
Car fatality. Yeah. But it's a case of, well, where's the balance in this?
Sure.
with it, we are moving away from personal decision making and on the emphasis of the state. And I do think that there is dangerous element to that, and that is a case of you lose your identity a little bit. You know, the nanny state knows best.
Sure.
And it also plays, like you just said, into the hand of exactly what they want, which is ID cards. Because obviously they tried last and they didn't have enough support. They're probably going to try again, and they'll say not only will it help us with the migration problem, but it will actually help us safeguard kids. So it just will keep going, unfortunately.
Harrison, stay with us. We're throwing out that question. Do you support the social media ban announced by Starmer 8 o'clock this morning? He was up early on this one. There had been a consultation for a number of weeks. They spoke to a lot of parents about it. Let's hear from you as a parent. Let's also hear the other angle. We mustn't let this bit go away. Government's banning stuff, the implementation of how they will verify age. All of these things are really important. I get the idea. Protect kids. I've got kids of exactly this. One's 12 and a half. This is his territory, OK? He's not on any of this stuff yet, although he does look at, you can see YouTube and he can game with his friends, but he's not on the conventional social media platforms. And bizarrely, he oddly asked about Snapchat only last night. So that interest is there. So we don't want kids to see bad stuff. We all agree with that. How do we do it? It's no good, by the way, just going, well, it's up to parents, isn't it? Yeah, to a degree. Then there's the playground, then there's the school bus, then there's after school, then there's other mates, people who've got phones, people who've got email accounts. Yeah, the list goes on. So we get that bit, but the bit we should be uncomfortable with is Keir Starmer, of all people, saying, I'm going to ban it. I'm going to ban it. He took total ownership of this. 0344 499 1000. Do you support the ban? Lines are open. This is Talk.
Genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 0344 499 1000. We've got Harrison Orman-Varty with us, leader of Reform UK for Elmbridge Borough Council. Let's move to this one. This is Nigel Farage. He's declared Britain a two-tier state, Harrison, against white people, claiming anti-white racism is now embedded across every part of the public sector, and he's vowing to scrap the Equality Act if reform comes to power. Here he is on what he would call two-tier Britain.
Now we have two-tier policing. As much as the Prime Minister denies it, two-tier policing, written in code for our police to obey, which says, don't treat everybody the same, treat ethnic minorities with a higher priority than Indigenous British people. And we have, as you say, people illegally coming into this country about whom we know absolutely nothing, other than some of them will do us great harm, and they go to the top of the social housing list. It's not fair. It's not right. This government had better do something pretty damn quickly, but I doubt that it will.
Yeah. Nigel Farage speaking. I mean, I can imagine where you're going to go on this one, Harrison. You being, you know, a member of Reform UK, you would support your leader on this. What do you say?
Yeah, no, he's on the money. I think, look, the biggest highlight of this was obviously that horrible case with Henry Novak. I mean, if that wasn't the ultimate, I guess, highlight of it, then what was? But we see it in all levels. I mean, even to the point of where you look at how, like Nigel just said, then housing accommodations. You know, you look at people that have come across have somehow priority over those who have been on the housing register. Some of whom for years, they're desperate. You know, you actually couldn't make it up. So, and for what we need, I mean, the simple answer to all of this is the fact that the likes of, for example, Hampshire Police have on their website to overlook and prioritize people who are different. No one has asked for that. No one really wants that. You know, whether you're a person of color or whether you're white, whatever it might be, you just want to know that I want to be treated equally and without fortune or favor, and I'm a blank slate, right? Neither above nor below. And unfortunately, it's everywhere you look at. When you even look at graduate schemes now, some of them where you have to be of certain backgrounds to apply for, you know, they're moving. They would say this is not equality anymore. They call it equity. You know, it's not diversity, equality, and inclusion. It's equity. You know,
yes, equity is somehow meant to sound as if it's the kind of justice, as if it's correct and with no arguments. You know,
they would say that it's because they're so disadvantaged that equality is not enough. Because by saying that everybody has an equal chance, it's not enough from someone who's had a disadvantaged start, right? And I would say that's incredibly patronizing for someone who, let's just say, does get a job. They're going to think, oh, hold on, have I just got this job because I'm a box ticking exercise? I mean, how insulting is that? You want to get it based on that you're the best for the job. And that's also, hey, great for the business as well. So it's just awful. I mean, and when you look at how this works, right, you look at a lot of these companies who enforce this on their employees, right? They know it's rubbish, right? The employees know it's rubbish, right? You go higher and higher, and what you're looking at is it's all to do with the ESG scores. Is have they ticked the box? Have they pushed that on?
Yeah.
So big investors and your big lenders or the government, contracts, whatever it might be, can go, did they tick that box? They go, yes, we did. We've got our ESG scores. And that's where woke has come from, essentially, in a nutshell.
Well, when I worked at the BBC, I know I was only there for about half an hour, but while I was there, I mean, the producers had to make a big list at the end of every show of who appeared, and that include, you know, gender, sexuality, as far as they knew, ethnicity, that kind of stuff. And this wasn't about, right, have you got the best guests? And the weird thing is about, if you look at guests that you can use on different subjects, I mean, the best guest might well not be white, and that's fine, but you don't need to make a note of that.
Who cares?
I mean, no, well, exactly that. And I get that years ago, and I really think you have to go back quite a lot of years, there was a general problem where I suppose people would have hired, maybe, you know, for the argument's sake here, a white person, even if a black person might have been like, oh, I'll just hire the white guy, you know, looks a bit familiar to me. I don't doubt that sort of general thinking might have gone on, not because somebody's a mad racist, but because that's just the way it was, you know, back then in the day, in the 50s or the 60s, people were just probably looking at somebody with a foreign accent and thinking, well, you know, I probably just want an English person or a Scottish person or a Welsh person. So I can see how that happened. But the idea you then take it to the point where it doesn't matter if you are fully qualified for the role, as long as you can tick a couple of boxes, then you're in. I mean, that's madness.
There will always be racists, unfortunately, in our society. There'll always be horrible people, for whatever reason, who might favour one group over the other. And it's not limited to white people. It might be all sorts of groups where they prefer their clan, whatever it might be, right? Unfortunately, with society, there's always going to be bad apples. To then mandate basically racism is not the answer, right? To then say just because and realistically, you'll be pretty hard pressed nowadays to prove institutional racism, really, in any of our institutions against black people. Then it's a case of, well, what are we doing this for? Unfortunately, there are always going to be awful people. But does that mean now every single company or in the public or every public sector organization has to prioritize people of color over white people? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't seem to stack up. I think realistically, the dream outcome is we don't care about people's sexuality or colour of their skin. It's purely based on merit. That is the best scenario in this. And I think the left is obsessed with categories and groups, and you're in that box and you're this box. And realistically, you just want to be candidate 3819, whatever it might be, and you've been hired because you had a really good CV and you're going to contribute well to the business. And you show up and you go, oh, there it is. That's what it looks like, whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't even have any sort of effect, because realistically, as we all know, the colour of your skin has no effect to how you perform a day-to-day job.
Well, also, there is another issue around here, and that is class. And sometimes class has been the problem, not colour. It's just been about, if you take the sort of higher echelons of the boardroom and places like that, although the fabric of the boardroom has completely changed, it's not weird that in 1970, when Jim was, stacking shelves in Tesco, that 30 years later he might be the chairman of Tesco because he worked his way up. The idea that is a white person in a white country, and certainly in the 1950s it would have been very white. It's not bizarre that Jim made it to the chairman. Nobody should be saying, Jim, I think you should move aside for someone. It's like, hang on a sec, I was stacking Heinz beans in 1957. Of course I'm now the bloody chairman. I made my way up there. There was nobody that looked different to me when I started, so it's no big surprise that those in higher positions might disproportionately be white. Plus, spoiler alert, that would be the higher disproportion of the country as well.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, if I went to a predominantly black country, I'd find it quite hard for me to go, well, why isn't there more people like me? When I know that the population is majority black. So I just think this obsession, to be honest, is over these categories, when realistically the average person simply does not care.
Let's get a final story, and it's a moment, well, I know you love these moments, Harrison, where we can give a big congratulations to the French, because £660 million of British taxpayers' money later, France is apparently decided to turn up and do its thing. They're now stopping almost 2/3 of migrant boats before they reach our shores. Ministers say it is working. Others will ask what happens to the third that are still getting through. Let's have a listen and a reminder of what Keir Starmer promised on that deal with France.
For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order to break the gang's business model, secure our borders, and get the results that people want to see.
Well, apparently we can now see it. It's trebles all round for the government, apparently, Harrison. Or are we missing something here?
It's the first time we've ever heard that. I mean, the government's saying that it's a success. Look, we'll see. The end of the year, we'll see what the figures are. We all know that the biggest deterrent is weather to any crossings. It's not quite one in, one out, like he promised either. The numbers aren't quite in that sense. And really, 660 million to call it a success. Now we're starting to see, all right, well done. They've started to work after all these years. To call this a success is, not even close. We will see what over the summer, as the weather gets better more consistently, what will happen to those numbers. But for now, it's far too early for any sort of individual to claim success in the channel.
On that point, Harrison, good to see you again. We will speak very soon. Harrison Allman-Varty, leader of Reform UK at Elmbridge Borough Council. Thank you to him. More from you on the way. On social media, Nikki in Bristol says, Ian, I do not support restricting internet access for kids under 16. As a single parent, I'm fully capable of setting boundaries and saying no when necessary. My child did not have a phone until he was 13, and when he got one, it had parental controls in place. If he wanted to download an app, play certain games, or share his phone number, I received a notification and could approve it or decline it. He doesn't use TikTok or Facebook, and I've always taken an active role in monitoring what he accesses online. I also think it's very hypocritical that Starmer wants to protect children. Grooming gangs come to mind, and how are they protecting children when parents are losing jobs every day because of the ridiculous taxing? Some great points there, Nikki. Thank you for that. Nikki in Bristol. We'll talk to a couple of guests with differing views on this issue. What are your thoughts? Do you support the social media ban? 0344 499 1000. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just a little after 1:30, Matt's in Saddleworth, who says, on the under-16 social media ban, my daughter is 12, and when she started secondary school, we got her a phone, but told her absolutely no social media until she's 16. It's always been a worry that the rule would get harder to stick to as her mates got the apps and that she'd end up being left out or bullied. I mean, the peer pressure thing is not a kind of tiny issue with kids at that age, because my son is 12, so I have the same knowledge as Matt does. It's the peer pressure thing is huge. He says, I worry she'd end up getting bullied. So honestly, I'm quite relieved the government is stepping in to level the playing field, but I am worried about the slippery slope. Where does the law stop? I don't want this being used as a backdoor excuse to force digital ID on all of us adults just to use the internet, says Matt. And of course, there is another bit of an elephant in the room. We can talk about VPNs and the like, but social media is only one aspect of the internet. And, you know, the internet itself, if you wanted to see something mucky or disturbing, just go to a search engine and look it up that way, because you'll find it. So if it's about taste and decency, then there are still other ways in. I'm not advocating that. I'm merely just pointing out the obvious. Let's get a word on this. And, of course, it comes after Keir Starmer today made that announcement, 8 o'clock this morning, that under-16s will be banned. We're talking TikTok, Snapchat and others enforcing the ban through potentially facial scans and digital IDs. Now, that could be passports, unlikely to be a driving licence for a kid that age, and even impose overnight social media curfews on older teenagers. So already there are other elements to this. It is either the most serious attempt to protect kids that we've ever seen online, or the biggest expansion of state surveillance of ordinary families in living memory. Which one is it? Let's speak with Ben Kingsley. Ben is Legal Director at Safe Screens, and also Jack Coulson, Head of Advocacy at Big Brother Watch. Afternoon to you both. Ben, I'm going to assume, bearing in mind Safe Screens, your organisation, that you would largely be in support of what has been announced today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yes, look, it's a pretty game-changing moment for child protection. I agree. I think what's important is that the government's acknowledged that online safety is not just about the content that children see online. The addictive functionalities and, frankly, the exploitative business models of many of these platforms are among the greatest sources of harm to children. So, look, this isn't going to be a complete solution. I'm certain it's not going to be a perfect solution either, but it's a really significant step, and it's one that I think was overdue.
On that point, Jack, I mean, it's quite a seductive argument, isn't it? You know, there's some bad stuff out there. We don't want kids to see bad stuff, whether it's beheading, sexual abuse, assault, bullying, suicide, and all manner of other things. What's not to like?
Thank you for that question. I agree. Doing everything we can to keep children safe online is everyone's priority. But I'm afraid I don't agree that this is a step forward in that regard. The evidence coming out of Australia is not supportive that this blanket ban approach is going to work. We've seen criticism of it from the Scottish Children's Commissioner and from the Molly Rose Foundation. What we do know this means, though, is that the government is proposing to lock down large sections of the internet, subject to members of the public providing their ID or some other form of age verification technology, which often involves having their face biometrically scanned. This isn't like going to the shops. You can't just have someone taking an eye at you and deciding you look over 25. The only way to do this in practice is to require everyone to be checked. So this really is digital ID for the internet. Do
you think then that is, because there is that theory out there, they're only doing this for that reason, or do you think it's just sort of chimed at a similar time? Is there a genuine, a heavy conspiratorial component to this, Jack?
I wouldn't want to speculate on the motives of the government and what the timing of this announcement means, or why they'd actually want to do it. And to be clear, don't doubt that Keir Starmer is serious about doing what he can to protect children. There are real harms out there that need real solutions. Our concern is this isn't one of them.
And Ben, I was saying just before you came on, you probably heard that one of the, to me, it's not a point, it's more of a question. You know, the internet is full of the, you know, it's amazing in terms of what it's done, and what we can research, and how kids can gain knowledge, and they do their homework online, and they use the internet and all the good parts of it. But of course, if you wanted to look at some pretty grim stuff, you don't need social media, you just need Chrome or Safari.
Look, I agree, and it's important to say this is not a policy, a proposal that is going to age-gate the internet. This is about focusing on, as it happens, it's relatively small number of major platforms in the first instance that are the source of a material amount of harm to a very significant number of children. We're not just talking about children that are affected in the most devastating way, loss of life or other very serious forms of abuse, but just the very pernicious, continuous dripping of inane content to children, to keep them hooked on these platforms, which is destroying sleep patterns. It's upsetting children's ability to think clearly, to concentrate in school. You know, these are, you might say, low-level harms, but they're so pervasive and they have such long-term impacts on children that we just can't ignore them. I'm afraid that the idea that, you know, that this is a choice between what's been proposed and the status quo is just false. The status quo of venues that are free to exploit children, to leave them exposed to abuse, and most importantly, to addict them to using these platforms, is just morally indefensible. Something had to change.
And Jack, on that point, because I'm, you know, as a father of two kids, I'm genuinely fascinated about, you know, what kids, because my kids will always say, oh, can I go on YouTube? Can I look at this? You know, trying to get my 12-year-old off a Spider-Man game yesterday took just the most extraordinary amount of time, just because Peter Parker couldn't climb a flipping building properly. But that's not my doing. But the issue around the internet, is it a case of playing catch-up to some degree, that it is game-changing, it is very different, and even if you put to one side the obvious horrors that we've talked about, violence, suicide, sexual content, etc., grooming, all of these things are obviously bad. There is a kind of wider issue about how we've almost, and this would, I suppose, apply to adults as well, but the doom scrolling, the, you know, getting up in the night and checking stuff, whether it's, you know, a massive class group on WhatsApp, or whether it's just looking at daft videos of, you know, somebody in a Starbucks somewhere in Wyoming kicking off because their latte was cold or whatever. All that stuff, you know, it can be quite fun, but it can be quite addictive. Do we not just have to get real and say, look, okay, we don't like government intervention, but, you know, kids are growing up differently solely because of this change in behaviour?
On that, I couldn't agree more. I think children have been let down by the tech companies, and they've been let down by governments for decades now. I would say so much of what Ben is calling for when it comes to a really radical cultural shift to how we approach this technology and its relationship to children, I would fully support. And certainly, I hope that this is an engine for kickstart a broader debate as to what will actually work to make the situation better. Where I think we disagree is whether the contents of what's been announced today will be themselves the engine of that change.
I was going to say, I mean, on that point, Ben, I have to say, and I understand that, you know, the work of parents, and, you know, the amount of parents that endorse, you know, I kind of get that notionally, I understand it. I do quiver a bit when I heard, I don't want to hear Prime Ministers using the word ban very often. I struggle with that. And when I heard Keir Starmer, you know, even enlisting the pronoun I will ban. And I thought, wow, that's the sort of thing Kim Jong-un normally wheels out, not a British Prime Minister. Is there any part of you, Ben, despite the good work and great intentions of Safe Screens and other similar organisations, is there a part of you that thinks, well, you know, laws are often about setting precedents, aren't they? Because this is one ban. I mean, what next? A similar thing for adults, maybe?
Well, I think there's a number of points in there very, very well made. This is about setting precedents. It's about sending social signals. I agree with that, and I hope that this is the start of a very strong social signal about not only sort of what's appropriate, but you know what's right for for children's futures. Is, you know, do we as a society think that the direction we've been going in, where they're sucked into this vortex of online or the online world is good for them. I think many parents who sat and watched their children, their teenagers, conclude very rapidly no. But to the point that Jack's advocating, I do equally agree that we all need to be cautious about government intervention. I don't think there's a point of disagreement on that. But I think what I would say is that this measure is not about government intervening in free speech. I know some people feel that that's what it looks like. That it would be unfair to say that this is a government policy. They've been dragged by their heels to do this. They resisted 4 times in the Houses of Parliament adopting something along this approach. They whipped their MPs to vote against amendments that would have done pretty much what they've just announced. This is not their choice. They've been forced to do it. So I think those that think that this is a sneaky way for the government to introduce digital IDs are wrong on that. I don't think digital ID is in any way is an essential part of the age verification processes that are going to have to sit behind this. But I do agree with Jack and with others that we nevertheless need to remain alert to mission creep here, that the government doesn't use this as the starting point to do other more sinister things. But that's not a reason to say we shouldn't be stepping in to protect children.
And Ben, what about the issue of kids usurping this? The early results from Australia seem to suggest, I think it was sort of 60% of kids still find a way around it, whether it's VPNs or whether it's looking at social media in a different way, whether it's just having clips emailed to them that they can see what's going on, or they can join in under a Moody ID, or they've found their uncle's driving licence or whatever. All of those factors are very real as well.
Absolutely. And there will be plenty of probably teenagers rather than the youngest children who will find ways to usurp, as you say, whatever laws and regulations you put in place. The evidence from Australia, I think, is often brought up as suggesting that policies like this have failed or are failing. I disagree on that, and actually many in Australia, including the Safety Commissioner, would disagree, and they say the fact that there are still many children accessing prohibited platforms in Australia is not because the policy has failed, it's because the platforms themselves, for commercial reasons, are dragging their heels, and that's why the Commissioner is now moving to take enforcement action against them. I think what they're saying in Australia is there is now a societal shift, and that's what's really important about these sorts of measures.
And Jack, just a final point on that. I mean, we can talk about the responsibility of tech companies. I guess what perhaps one of the problems is, and correct me if I've got this wrong, but when you're talking to the likes of Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, these guys are very, very protective over amendments and free speech. It is not for a corporation or a government to tell other people what they can and cannot watch. And if it's grim, yep, fine. You'll find 95, 98% of it isn't grim. It's just interesting, or at worst, it's a bit daft. But most of it is, it's down to choice. And that seems to fundamentally be the bit that kind of riles them, the idea that governments would get involved in this. Having said that, I'd like to think, Elon Musk, I know he's a bit mad, but he's also a genius. Picasso was a bit mad. He was a genius as well. So I'm not going to criticise him for being a bit bonkers in that respect. But, Zuckerberg, bit of a family man from what I understand. If you said to Mark Zuckerberg, do you think it's okay to have, a sexual assault online or a beheading or any of this stuff, I'm sure in his intelligent brain would say, well, no, it's terrible. But, it's not for me to decide. I would have thought, certainly algorithms and AI now could, if they wanted to. I was reading that Anthropic, one of the big AI companies, had to sort of row back on their latest version of Claude, I think it was, because it was so powerful that it was almost, out of control of the human hand. And, if it can do that, I'm sure it can stop somebody showing their todger on Twitter.
I suspect so, and I also think that we do sometimes let some of these providers off the hook by pretending that a lot of lessons we've learned from previous technologies don't still apply. Editors are responsible for what they allow into their publications, and absolving themselves of responsibility for what's available on their platforms is a neat rhetorical trick, but I don't think it's speaking in favour of a particularly sophisticated understanding of free speech. Free speech is the ability for us all to express ourselves in a democracy, even if we don't necessarily want to hear everything everyone else has to say, but that's quite different from going out of one's way to harm someone else, and quite different from creating a hose pipe that sprays at quite such a velocity that it is apparently impossible to control. So I think there are really interesting, deeper democratic questions here about the role we expect citizens to play, the role we want children to play in developing into those citizens.
Yeah.
But I do wholeheartedly agree that the tech companies could be doing a lot more.
On that point, Jack, thank you for your time. And Ben, too. Thank you, guys. Jack Coulson is the head of advocacy at Big Brother Watch. Thank you to him. And Ben Kingsley, legal director of Safe Screens. Over to you. I think the taste thing is interesting because there's another crossover in the kind of Venn diagram here, and that is about news. And I was having this debate with a couple of people online, this was on Twitter, about what headlines should look like, what mainstream media would show and wouldn't show. Do they, by showing something, are you compromising a potential court case? Are you it's called sensationalising and editorialising. They're the kind of big offences. And the BBC should be held to a higher bar than anyone else because we pay for it. I get that. So if you got rid of everything that was grim and upsetting, would you, in that respect, would you begin to potentially curtail the authenticity of news or the brutal honesty, sometimes the brutal honesty of news in terms of what is needed to be seen in order to educate? Or do we even need to see? I mean, that, again, these are all sort of judgment calls. I don't know, how do you like your news? Nice and violent, bit gory, the full splash, everything going on. Oh, look, there's a kid that jumped on another kid's face in the playground and took half their cranium out. That's good to show that, because then it's, you know, we want to see how bad it was, to see how much we could attack the bad guy. Do you need to see that? I don't need to see that, but maybe some people do. So you get into that territory. That's almost a whole other debate about taste and decency alone. This is fundamentally about kids at this stage. 0344 499 1000. Do you support the social media ban? Over to you. More questions, more comments on the way. Coming next on Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. This comes from Claire in Lancashire. I will not be told by that idiot at number 10 what my 14-year-old daughter does under my roof. Call me old-fashioned. But me and her dad do that crazy thing called parenting. Really, Claire? You're into that, are you? into a bit of parenting. Good Lord. I live in the northwest, so I can assure you that what is going on up here and the HMOs that are popping up around us is much scarier. I worry about my daughter walking home from the school bus. I'd rather the PM keep her safe on the streets. I'll keep her safe at home. And yeah, you put it like that, and that's completely fair, which is why it's one of those debates, isn't it, where there is more than one answer. There really is. I thought it was interesting what our previous guest said. You have to remember that Labour, they didn't want anything to do with this. They resisted it at every level. I think his words were that they came kicking and screaming to the party. What will perter the Americans was one point. Pav's in Harrow on this. So, Pav, very simple. You know this with a legal brain. Do you want your kids to watch bad, suicidal, self-harming, horrendous, knifing, beheading, violent stuff? The obvious answer is no. So why would anybody be against it? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Well, if the question's loaded, I know you weren't necessarily asking in that manner, then the answer would be emphatically no. It would in most situations. But just before I get into it, you had a chap on earlier. I did chortle and chuckle at the same time, Ian, when he said, oh, well, the evidence from Australia isn't that it's failed, the tech companies are dragging their heels. Ergo, it's failed. And when you then quote Julie Inman, for anybody who has any idea about the E-Safety Commission in Australia, I've got to confess that I do get worried when she thought she could incorporate a global ban on things that happened last year. But we digress. The problem that you've got here, and it's fundamental, right? And I have been, I was saying to Faith just before I came on, I have been, frankly, disenchanted with some of the stuff I've been hearing on various platforms this morning when people are applauding this nonsense. Because for me, the fundamental aspect of this is yet more incursion by the state, be it Labour, be it the Conservatives, and I'll get onto them in a second, into parental responsibility. Yes, folks, and you all know this, Ian, my kids are slightly younger than yours, parenting is never about being easy. Sometimes there are difficult things you have to do, and this is one of them. On a personal note, I tell my children, and this is a hard and fast rule, they don't have phones, they have access to my wife's iPad, and she's there. When I come into the room, whatever they're doing, they go down and they talk to me, and while I'm there, end of story. So they cannot just sit there, like lemmings or seals while we're there and just ignore them. But this is the fundamental problem. The idea, and as well as the fact that, I've spoken to you about this infantilization, how far do we go with this? So smoking harms people, and I speak as a non-smoker, non-drinker. Do we ban that? Same with drinking, same with gambling, same with everything else. Of course, unfortunately, when you have things which potentially some people may consider vices, others may say they're indulgences, there are going to be problems. They're never perfect. Same, of course, with the ban on sugary foods. But the reality is, and I'm glad for once Starmer actually conceded this relatively early within his interviews, is that if you try to ban things in this day and age, there are so many ways, Ian, so many ways to circumvent it. And I speak as a tech foe. I can circumvent things. So if I can, God only knows what these children with far more proficiency in that sphere will be able to do. And we see this, by the way, in Australia. The concerning thing for me, by the way, and this was one of the things that one of your earlier guests got right, is that the Conservatives were pushing this. You had Conservative, I can't remember which one. She was on, I think, Jeremy's show earlier, championing it, going, oh, look, we've done this. Hello, you're supposed to be the Conservative. Censorship and banning is supposed to be done really as a final resort. But the problem that you have with a lot of these folks is they simply don't understand. And as far as Starmer goes, to me, as soon as I heard this, my instant reaction here was legacy politics. We saw this with Sunak, the smoking ban, as if that's going to be implemented.
Oh, I think this is definitely, he's looking at this as his last hurrah. This is going to be the moment. He could conceivably be gone, quite literally, in 2 weeks' time. So as a result of that, he's gone big on the social media thing. But as a previous guest said, Pav, he was resistant to this before.
Yeah, but that's the whole point, Ian. And of course, the other one was bloody Theresa May with her net zero. But that's the point. For me,
she was great. Come on.
Right? This is whatever. Couple of minutes. Encapsulated. At the end of the day, you've got to show leadership. And it's not as though anybody's going to say, no, we don't want our children protected. Of course not. But as with the breakfast clubs, as with all this thing, you have to have, something which is proportional to the problem. This is not proportional. This is exactly what you've just said. Whether he's dragged there resisting or whatever else, this was really a marker for him to say, no, I'm not going to engage in that because I understand that for all the ills, there should be some onus on parents. But the way, as I said to you at the outset, that people have been endorsing this, you almost have to ask. And your colleague, who sadly is deceased, who I used to speak to a heck of a lot, who actually coined the name Power for Marriage, James Well, used to say this, and I used to laugh with him. And he used to say, well, is it a time, tongue-in-cheek, is it a time that we need a license for parents? And I used to laugh with him and say, James, come on, you can't be that hard. But I'm beginning to think the man was right. He had foresight, because honestly, the way people are given in with candor, going, oh, this is great. This is, somebody even said earlier on a different station, she said, well, this is the opportunity we need. This was essentially the foundation we need. And I was just sitting there going, are you genuinely serious? Like, you need the government to show you the way.
But is there a point? But is there a point when the world changes? This would be the argument where the world changes so significantly that a government intervention is the right thing to do. You don't allow kids to buy porn mags off the top. There are rules against that. And once upon a time, once the printing press came out, it didn't take very long for people to start going, we don't just put special legalese words on this thing. We can put pictures of naked folk. So that became a thing at one point. The governments would say, we do have a role somewhere. 20 seconds if you can, Pav.
Not a problem. Well, that's fine, but if you're going to take that approach, it doesn't half get kiboshed by the fact that you've been banging on in your manifesto and thereafter saying 16 and 17-year-olds deserve a say in our future, deserve a say in democracy, and yet by the same token, you don't think they're sufficiently responsible to be able to self-regulate all through their parents on YouTube, social media. I mean, honestly, Ian, the irony is absolutely staggering.
Pav, love it. Thank you very much indeed. Pav in Harrow on the social media ban. Your counter-arguments to that, if you would. As a parent, you might have experienced the dark side of your kid being addicted, whether it was just the doom scrolling or something more specific. 0344 499 1000. We'll take more of your calls and comments on the other side of the news at 2 o'clock, which is next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Loads to get through, as you've been hearing in the first hour. It's a lively hour. Keir Starmer announcing plans to raise the minimum social media age to 16, enforce through facial recognition and some form of digital ID, though many have already dismissed it as unlikely to work given the widespread use of VPNs. And that's just one way that kids might find their way around it. Do you support the ban, or what are your experiences where you would look at this and think, nope, this is merely a parental issue, not for the state? Also this afternoon, EV charging companies are threatening to pull £2 billion worth of planned investment if Starmer waters down net zero targets, as the PM reportedly prepares to slash the 2030 EV sales mandate from 80% to 50%. This overrules his own energy secretary in the process. Is that going to be another one of Starmer's legacies as he gets ready to walk the plank? And the US and Iran have agreed a framework peace deal to be signed, with Trump announcing the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices already tumbling nearly 5%, though experts warn it could actually take many months before supply fully normalises. Let's go back to more of your comments as well. Chris in Greenham says, this is reference to the whole kind of cyber, internet, social media, kids, etc. Chris says, I work in cybersecurity. I do not see the point of having this ban. It will be instantly circumnavigated by the use of VPNs and the risk of data being captured by dodgy VPNs and used as blackmail. This problem is real. One could probably pop into one of the many mobile phone repair shops and have them bypass the controls. The use of digital ID would require such a secure system to store it and classed as critical national infrastructure, which means it would take years to develop and test correctly. If the digital ID database was breached, all hell would break loose, says Chris. And some really fair points of somebody who works in the field of cybersecurity, although digital ID is very much on the way. Everyone's telling me that they don't even, there's no point in debating it, because it's coming, and it's been in the pipeline, the cyber pipeline, for yonks. True or false? 0344 499 1000. We'll go back to more of you. We've got some great comments in on this one as well. And on the social media thing and kids, I'm intrigued by, we've had loads of people say, look, this is a parent, I don't need Keir Starmer to be the parent here. I can be the parent. I will work out what my kid can and cannot see. I mean, obviously you can't stop them what they see on somebody else's device on the school bus or the playground. But in terms of what they are looking at, there are parental controls. They're not always easy. They're quite tricky. Sometimes they just stop working. You're not quite sure why. You think, well, hang on a second. What's he doing on you? He's 7. How did he get on YouTube? You do spot those moments. Then you realise something is unclicked or a box hasn't properly administered what it's meant to do. It's tricky, all right, but it's possible. Or have you been the parent that has seen the very dark side of what happens when a kid gets too involved in social media, whether it's because of the content they're seeing, and we've talked about violent sexual content, or whether it's just down, and this seems to be a massive one, just the doom scrolling, just kids laid there in bed, shouldn't have their phone there really, I guess, just looking through Twitter or Instagram, whatever. I mean, how many adults don't do that? Because it's the easiest thing in the world. You want to pass 2 hours very quickly, just start having a look through just nonsense, riffraff, weirdness, amazement, the Wild West that is social media. We will return to that shortly. Now, Nigel Farage has declared that Britain is a two-tier state and that it's against white people, claiming that anti-white racism is now embedded across every part of the public sector. He's vowing to scrap the Equality Act entirely if reform comes to power. Here he is speaking to The Breakfast Show about two-tier Britain.
Now we have two-tier policing. As much as the Prime Minister denies it, two-tier policing, written in code for our police to obey, which says, don't treat everybody the same, treat ethnic minorities with a higher priority than Indigenous British people. And we have, as you say, people illegally coming into this country about whom we know absolutely nothing, other than some of them will do us great harm, and they go to the top of the social housing list. It's not fair. It's not right. This government had better do something pretty damn quickly, but I doubt that it will.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. Let's speak with Alex Klaushofer, the author and journalist. Nice to have you on with us, Alex. I mean, I'm tempted to say, as much as it's it's a great national sport to have a pop at Keir Starmer, it should be taught in schools, frankly. However, a lot of this stuff would, to be fair, predates Starmer, right? I mean, this stuff's been going on for years.
Well, I personally became aware of two-tier policing during 2020 when I was volunteering to feed the homeless in Whitehall and Westminster and going in regularly, and that crossed with the Black Lives Matters demos. And for about 3 weeks, almost every day, I could see the police and a lot of young people basically partying, which personally I didn't blame them for. I didn't have a problem with that. But then I wondered, well, what is the policing style? Is that going to be on the anti-lockdown protests, which I hadn't been on? So in September, I went on one and I was deeply shocked because I saw a completely different style of policing, really aggressive, completely different attitude. I almost didn't recognise it from the style of policing that I'd lived with, grown up all my life in this country. So I think that two-tier policing is part of a much wider problem in which the police have basically almost lost the plot. They've certainly departed from the quintessentially British philosophy of policing, which is that policing is by consent. The police are the public and the public are the police. They're not there to obey the government and enact the state and any ideologies, whatever they may be, of the state. They're there to support law and order for the people because they are part of the people. And I think they've forgotten that.
I can almost hear, and I get all of that, and everything you said was brilliantly said, Alex, but I can hear, a young black guy in, South London somewhere, saying, are you serious when it comes to two-tier policing? Someone who's been pulled over God knows how many times for the audacity of driving their own car or being out at a certain time of night. A lot of people from the non-white communities think this is hilarious, that us whiteys are getting all boastful and moaning about two-tier policing.
I completely understand that. I agree. I think part of this and part of the danger in this level of discussion and focusing on very specific incidents and groups is that we're in danger of being set against each other in Britain.
So yes,
divide and rule.
Yeah, well, I mean, the police's defence is that when it comes to protests, they have to walk a bit of a tightrope. That if they police what you might call the average protest that is not linked to ethnicity or religion or something, then they just police it as the police rule book or guidelines would say. If they police a black protest, then the landmines and the bear traps are everywhere. And the minute they stand on one, all hell will break loose. They'll be accused of God knows what, racism, industrial scale. So their argument is it's not actually two-tier, it's just a different approach.
I get that with respect to the specific issue of protesting, but the context is that the police have been given huge powers, much greater powers in the last few years, progressively. Lockdown was obviously a Rubicon, but then, there's been various laws passed whereby they're getting more and more power all the time. They're asking for more power. They're getting more technological power. So I think we have to put this all in the context of what policing is for, who they are, the purpose of policing, and to remember that we are supposed to be a liberal democracy. And so when you get police doing things like in the Novak case, and a police officer is really disregarding something, that is part of a wider situation in which the police, from what I've seen in the last few years, basically just become very authoritarian. Convinced that they're right.
Yeah, and I think that, to me, I mean, there is a police position on this, and I suppose any IOPC inquiry, we hope, will shine some light. This was just an officer that got it horribly wrong and made an assumption. It wasn't based on any training course they'd been on. They just simply thought they were attending a racial assault. They went to it, drunk guy on the floor, and that's it. It's a horrendous mistake, and, clearly those involved will never quite get over it, and understandably so. So it could be that. However, even if it is that. We know that the College of Policing has literally written a guideline to say treat people differently.
Again, I would say that breaks the code of policing, the philosophy.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because policing in this country is supposed to be about impartiality and treating every person and people have multiple identities, right? We all belong to different groups and can be seen in different ways.
Yep.
Every person, every identity and social group is supposed to be treated equally. So this to me is a symptom of one of the many ways in which the police have become part of a set of prevailing ideologies. You might call them fashion sometimes, but they're very much linked to the institutions and what the state and recent governments have wanted. So it's a symptom of that. It's part of that picture in which the police are not of us and for us in the way that they used to be in Britain.
Indeed, and there is that thing about who goes to the top of the housing list. Now, I understand largely if you come to this country legally or legally in whatever respect, if there are kids involved, then you would go above on the housing list from a couple, for example, in most local authorities. I'm told that's the way it works because there are children. However, we also know that if you come over on a rubber boat, sometime by about 6 in the evening, you'll be staying in a hotel and you'll probably walk past, lots of homeless people, former service personnel who are living in shop doorways. Now, that example is very real and can't be right.
Yes. And the reason the public jumps on specific examples of injustice is because there's a general sense of injustice and unfairness in Britain now. And I don't have anything particular to say about illegal immigration. So obviously it's a policy and a problem that needs looking at and is not being looked at. There's no effective no effective action is being taken about it. So that all kind of slips into a wider attitude towards a set of attitudes and anxieties about policing and authority more generally. So people understandably feel that it's unfair and associate unfairness in policing in one area with unfairness in policing in another area. My take on all this is that for the last few years, very visibly and quite quickly, we've got away from our roots in terms of our principles and behaviours as a liberal democracy. So, yeah, these things keep happening.
Indeed. Alex, thank you for your time. Appreciate that. Alex Klaushofer, journalist and author. Thank you to her. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us on... I mean, the two-tier... Nigel Farage is talking about two-tier Britain, that it's a bigger thing than just the policing issue. I kind of get that what apparently was happening, not so much back in the day, that, the old Bill turn up to a bit of a melee going on. Bunch of white kids on one side of the road, example A, bunch of black kids on the other side of the road, example B. They are more likely to have arrested the black kids than the white kids. Every bit of data apparently shows that to be the case, even though they'd done exactly the same thing or hadn't done anything at all, but they'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, the same as the white kids. But the police statistically have arrested the black kids. So the advice is stop arresting the black kids for something you wouldn't arrest the white kids for. And that's where the trouble started. So that in itself sounds, yeah, OK, we've just for some reason, cops have decided to be over arresting black kids, not white kids. You've got to do something about that. So in essence, if it was as simple as that, you'd go, well, that's kind of, all right, I understand that. You don't want to be arresting people from one group when you wouldn't arrest the other group. That's not fair. But in doing that, everyone's lost their mind and gone, well, what about, maybe we can take it a step further. Maybe we can take it when there is actually some form of criminality. And Group B, the black kids, are guilty. Let's not arrest them there. But we will arrest the white kids. No. You've just gone. You're now doing exactly what you were doing, but the other way round. That can't work, right? Ian's in Cambridge on the two-tier state. What have you got for us, Ian? Hi.
Well, gosh, we're back to this again, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Here we go again. Gosh, if I'm a criminal, whatever colour I am, you ought to take me in.
Yeah.
It should be as simple as that. Gosh, we've had this conversation before. I mean, I hate this term, people of colour, because I mean, you know, if I'm green, you know, am I going to be discriminated slightly more? Because the point is, I mean, everybody's got a colour.
Yeah.
So we can begin with that. You know, the issue has got to be, look, you know, there are criminals of all types, and they need to be treated as such if you are a criminal, okay? Black, white, red, green, whatever, gay, straight. If you are a criminal, then you should be tackled. You know, if you're innocent, then...
But isn't the problem, Ian, that, you know, what Mr Farage seems to be saying here, you know, we have seen some examples of this, is that the police are deliberately going out of their way because they want to achieve an equality of outcome, which means that you might literally ignore a crime, because that way you can kind of balance the books when it comes to what percentages of different groups are guilty of certain crimes.
Yeah. In which case, all you're then doing is just tick boxing. You know, let's get rid of the tick boxes as well, because I mean, I hate them to some degree. Not that I'll put something else in an application, but basically, you know, it should be on meritocracy. But get rid of that, because I mean, unless we're going to end up with this kind of RoboCop type policing where it's like everything's centralized, and you know, I don't know whether AI might be able to help in that way, because the thing is, we don't want to be so mechanized. You know, we want to get the human beings back and say, look, crime needs to be tackled, irrespective of who, you know, whichever demographic, the crime is the issue, you know.
And that's exactly what it should be. And I don't really know a single sane person that would disagree with you. Ian, thank you for that. Ian in Cambridge. Great to have you on. 0344 499 1000. What do you think Nigel Farage means when he talks about a two-tier state? I know sometimes, I mean, you can go mad looking at the outcome of, oh, again, you see this all the time on social media. How did this person walk free and this person got 3 years? And I've done this job for 25 plus years. I've never known a time when those arguments have not been there. They're not always equivalencies. You've got a different jurisdiction, different judges, different parts of the country. It's not like one knows about the other and gone, oh, there's a fella just been, you know, released or not given a custodial sentence for downloading child pornography. And he walked. And here's another bloke that wrote some bad words on Facebook. I think I'll send him to jail, just to make the comparison. That's not happening, all right? No, people are going to jail, by the way, but what I'm saying is the judge isn't sitting there. There's not some big judicial system that says, let's really mix it up. Not jail this group, but jail it just, look, there's thousands of these cases daily. And to find consistency, and you see it even within the same crime. You know, once again, it's something more innocent. You know, every now and again somebody goes over their speeding points quota, and somehow managed to convince a magistrate that they shouldn't be banned because of the nature of their job or whatever. And, OK, how did he do that? But this person over here who literally has a job where they really do need the car, they couldn't make the same argument. So there's not always an equivalence, even when it's quite seductive to try and make it, if that makes sense. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Let's go to your calls. This is Roger in Belfast. How you doing, Roger?
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
Yes, doing very well.
Good.
You're spot on about the algorithm. You mentioned the algorithm because a lot of people don't realise this, but very recently the iPhone was upgraded with client-side scanning.
Client side?
Yeah, as opposed to server-side scanning. So the algorithm on your phone, you don't have to go on any app or any site, will scan what's on your phone, and if it sees nude photographs...
I heard somebody, I heard somebody say this last week during, obviously, a connected debate. I don't think it was just... Maybe it was about this. Yeah, actually, it would have been about this, because Starmer did make a speech about kids exchanging nude photos. And I heard somebody say that there's already a setting on your iPhone that would stop that happening.
Yes. Now, that setting, the tools are already there. That setting...
Where is that setting? Because I'd like to turn it on, frankly. I don't know about off.
Well, no, you can only... The only thing you can do is prove you're over 18. So this setting, the client side, meaning, you know, you're the client, as in not scanning on the server. So, okay, so it's stopping nude photographs from being sent or...
And what would that be under on your phone? Do you know? Just under security, privacy, or something like that?
Well, you don't get a choice.
So it's on there already?
Yes, it's already on there. If you prove you're over 18, they'll switch it off. Well, for that particular...
OK, so if Finn, my producer, wanted to send me a photograph of his naked torso, are you telling me that wouldn't reach my phone?
If you hadn't told
I can tell you
Apple that you're on, you know, you're over 18, it wouldn't, you know, So the tools are on the phone already. So say, I don't know, someone decided that certain hate speech was bad.
Well, yeah.
Talking about a certain incident where, you know, remember that incident that Starmer seen to it that all these people were jailed for tweets or whatever. So if the scanning sees that sort of information on your phone, it just won't let you send it. Doesn't matter if you're over 18 or not.
Well, that's rather my point on government controls, isn't it? That, you know, how far does it go? It's all very well going, we don't want kids to see bad stuff, but where do you take that next?
Well, it's gone to the ultimate already, where too late. The software's on the phone.
So the software's there. I'm being told that it's not been implemented by Apple yet.
Well,
but it was suggested in 2021, but at the moment it's not in place. It was cancelled. I don't know why.
It depends if you got the right update or not. Probably about a week ago, after an update,
Yeah.
Apple phone was asking me to prove that I'm over 18. So I'm in under 18 mode at the moment.
You're in under 18 mode?
Yes.
Right. What? Any reason?
Because I just declined to prove that I was over 18. So I haven't tried to send any news.
So you did, right, because of the face. I can't remember. Did I do that? I don't know. I mean, I normally, how many times have I had to wiggle my head in a 360 fashion to appease some app somewhere in the last 10 years? It seems to be the thing now, particularly with banking, of course. But so you didn't want to be ID'd in that respect?
Yes, I mean, yes, that's basically it. And I've spoken to lots of people who are in the same position. And so the tools are there. They'll decide.
Yeah.
You know what they don't like, and if that, you know. Yeah.
It's very tricky, isn't it? I mean, listen, Roger, thank you for that, because you get into the really. I mean, it's fascinating. When I was having this discussion with a guy on Twitter or on X about, and we had genuinely had a really nice chat about, and his original problem was the way the BBC had framed their headline over Belfast and what had allegedly happened in Belfast, and felt that it underplayed it to the point that there were some people that argued that this was not really a cover-up, but an example of why the mainstream media is not as honest as social media. And social media, of course, were showing everything. And then, of course, as always happens, you ended up getting other people coming along going, oh, there wasn't just one. There were two men there. Did you not see? One man ran off into that house. So all of this kind of confusion. The police are experienced with getting lots of confusing witness statements, so maybe it was just that. But the point is, the argument became, how can you trust the BBC when they put a headline that downplays what happened? Now, of course, that isn't... I'm not here to defend the BBC, but I am here to defend journalism. That isn't what the BBC did, because that headline changed over the course, probably half a dozen times over the course of a day. But the initial headline was very basic, that there had been a stabbing and someone was taken to hospital. There is literally nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And you don't editorialise, you don't give opinion, you don't sensationalise. It was the basic snapshot of what had happened. And, of course, if you read the story, this was just the headline, then you did get more detail about what it appeared had happened. But the BBC in particular can't be seen to definitively say, this happened. This is what's happened. You can talk about eyewitnesses. People, you see, and this is where, if you're not a journalist, you probably don't see any harm in this. Go, well, hang on, there's a video of it. Surely a video. You can see it in the video. We're not stupid. Well, we also have such a thing as court cases that deal with that. And remember how protective we were over the jury system. I mean, if you want to get rid of all the rules and regs around court cases and the relationship between journalism and the media, then fine. But I happen to think that most of those measures that are in place, there are some infuriating ones, particularly around elections and what you can and cannot say and how many candidates you have to read out and goodness knows what. But generally speaking, a lot of that stuff with the law works really well. But the argument came down to taste, ultimately. When I was having this chat with this guy, it was mostly about, are you OK seeing something very brutal on social media? Is that OK? And then shared around, like God knows what. Is that all right? Now, that, I suppose, is a judgment call, isn't it? I don't particularly want to see it. I wouldn't want my kids to see something like that. It's beyond brutal and barbaric. But that's the judgment call. That doesn't make Twitter or Facebook a better form of media or journalism because it shows it. It might appease some people. Oh, look, we're getting the true story. They didn't show that on the BBC. Imagine Fiona Bruce introducing that one. Oh, here's Clive Myrie with the torture section. I don't imagine that's something that most people would want their, or how their journalism to look. So there are sort of balances. But ultimately, I think with this social media stuff, which ties into what I was saying, it does come down largely to a matter of personal taste. Are you OK seeing that? And some people are, and they'll share it incessantly. And then, of course, you get the other issue of what is true, because a couple of hours later, there was another picture that went out purporting to be an injured man in Belfast, but in hospital with various scars. Turns out it wasn't the man at all, but not after, 12 million people had seen it, retweeted, commented on it, and asked why the mainstream media weren't showing it, because it wasn't the same man. So you have all of that to contend with. But taste, I think, ultimately, how we've recalibrated our taste, and are we recalibrating the taste of our children as well? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Leanne says, this... Oh, did I read Leanne's? This is about control. Oh, no, I don't think I did. This is about control, not safety. This is Keir Starmer's social media ban. I'm much more concerned that my son may be stabbed in the neck walking down the road than I am going on TikTok. He should be addressing that with the same efforts. Starmer's legacy will be he's the most disliked Prime Minister ever. So no need to do anything, frankly. He has the authority of a pencil sharpener, which only really has authority, of course, when you have a broken pencil. That's the only way I could go with that. Leanne, thank you. It's a good point, but I do wonder whether this is about Keir Starmer and legacy. Bearing in mind, him and his government, they were whipping their MPs to vote against this. They wanted nothing to do with it. And there were lots of parents going, look, we think there's something here that needs addressing. So I wonder whether this is Starmer's legacy. And that's it. And no other reason. Here's another one that might be part of Starmer's legacy. Either in a good way or a terrible way, depending on where you sit on the wider argument of net zero. EV charging companies are threatening to pull £2 billion worth of investment, not an insignificant amount, from Britain, if Keir Starmer waters down the net zero targets, warning that it would signal the government cannot be trusted. David Bailey is Professor of Business Economics at Birmingham Business School. Good to have you with us, David. I mean, I can see the point they're making, really. If you're a car manufacturer, I've had this discussion in all sorts of elements of the automotive issue. If a government says, right, this is what we're doing, and you change your entire business model to suit either a certain set of rules and regs and requirements and deadlines, and then the government go, oh, actually, no, we're not going to do that. Now, you'd be a bit grumpy.
You certainly would be a bit grumpy. And remember, there's been a lot of mucking about. So originally the target was for banning internal combustion was 2040, then 2030, then 2035, then 2030. So, it's hokey-cokey, really.
Yes.
But if we've got a bad policy, and I think the policy is bad, we shouldn't stick with it. And that, if the EV charging companies who are putting big investment into EV charging points, which we want, but if they're really basing their business planning on getting to 80% EV take-up by 2030, which is what the government mandate requires, they've got a problem with their business plan, because it ain't going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So the fundamental problem here is that the targets do not accord with reality. The target for this year is 33%. This year so far, 26% EV sales in the new car market. So, and then it ramps up very quickly. We simply ain't going to get there. So let's have targets that really can be realistic, can still lay out the direction of travel, underpin confidence, and enable investment. But this simply isn't working.
Indeed. And so notwithstanding the point I was making about companies being a bit grumpy, yeah, they're allowed to be grumpy if they want to be. But in many respects, I would actually argue they've also got to be flexible on this because, I don't think there's anyone, particularly in a very volatile world financially and in terms of global commerce, what's happening with Iran and goodness knows where else. So it would make sense that, something as kind of, almost uncharted in some respects as this, there's going to be changes and those targets might shift.
Absolutely. And, they've already shifted. I mean, they are investing heavily. That is absolutely true. But we need a realistic transition through to 2035. 2035 as a date is fine, but we need to get there in a way whereby we're ready for it in terms of the infrastructure and the prices of electric cars has come down and the industry has had time to adapt. Because if we kind of rush into this and insist on 2030 and 80% electric vehicle sales, people will see that's punitive, it'll be expensive, and actually we'll be opening the floodgates to Chinese cars coming in. We may not even have a UK industry left. So let's try and do it in a more realistic way. And look, I've been driving electric cars since 2014. They are the future. They work, but it doesn't yet work for everyone, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I bet that 2014 one, David, was a bit wonky looking back on it, because I remember driving one back then.
An eye-opener.
And it did about 8 miles.
It did about 80, but going to Coventry and back in a day, I mean, in the winter, I had to turn the heating off. But, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah, but things are changing. Listen, David, great to have you on with us. David Bailey, Professor of Business Economics, Birmingham Business School. Thank you to him. Over to you on that one, 0344 499 1000. I do have a sympathy with the charging companies, because if they're told, look, this is what we've got, and then they can build their infrastructure and their targets around that, and then the government go, but we're going to change it now. So in a weird way, the government should never have had unrealistic kind of ambitions around this area, because that's what's caused the flipping problem. One in here from Kim, Northampton. The online ban, I don't agree with it, as it should be down to the parents doing their job. On TV, they show sexual scenes and matters which are too graphic in my view. So are they going to reduce these too? Stop overreaching into parent spaces, and governments need to deal in laws only, as that is what we elect them to do. It's overreaching into our domain. You're right about, if you look at things like naked attraction, what was that thing called? Was it called Virgin Island or something that was on TV a couple of weeks back, which I just, when you're channel hopping, you think, what the hell, what have I just stumbled across here? That would never have been on the telly like 10 years ago. This is new, they're pushing the boundaries, and we now know whereas sort of Married at First Sight and shows such as that have come under a bit of scrutiny for a whole variety of reasons. So, yeah, TV has definitely changed the barriers, certain channels more so than others. Social media, I suppose, will... there is, another example of the many horrendous things. There is, I won't go into too much detail, so there is a bit of a trigger warning on this, but many of you will have seen it, of a girl who was not properly connected during a bungee jump. I think this was in Brazil. I say not properly connected, not connected at all. And that whole thing, unblurred, is on social media. Now, I don't want to see that. More than that, my first thought when I see that is the girl's family will have that there for... That would never have been a thing once upon a time. So that will have been viewed millions and millions of times. And so the question you ask yourself is, what have we become as a race of people, as humans, where we're kind of... People go to work and go, oh, my God, you see the bungee jump video? But that will be asked. And you go, yeah, I saw it this morning. Wow, unbelievable, isn't it? Will we be any poorer? Will we be less cultured if we don't see people meeting their death in a horrific manner? Why do we need to see it? But again, that's a taste and decency. The one thing I do think of is family. I think of family when I think of some of those, somebody somewhere was the first person to post that without thinking, this poor girl has a mother and a father, possibly kids, certainly lots of relatives and friends. And for the rest of time, her death will be published online for all to see. Now, when you put it like that, you think something maybe's gone a bit wrong. But of course, the other answer is, or the other question is, did we already have the appetite for this stuff, but didn't have any way of feeding it? Or did we create the appetite because of those forums? Joe is in Bournemouth on the social media ban. What have you got, Joe? Good afternoon.
Hello. Yeah, I just think something needs to be done, but I just think they're going the wrong way about it.
Okay.
To be honest, with banning things, I believe that these things are addictive, and they make them addictive.
Yes, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? There's very few things we casually endorse that have been designed to be deliberately addictive. So when it comes to gambling online, we know that that's meant to have an addictive quality to it, even though companies will say, we don't do what we used to do, we've got lots of warnings. But we don't congratulate we don't really have a massively positive opinion of some of the worst examples. But social media seems to get a bit of a free ride on this to some extent.
It does, and just not only that, so does gaming. I mean, I've got an 11-year-old boy, and the gaming it's very addictive. You know, he also goes on things, and we constantly fight. We've got everything. We have Family Link. We have a provider that actually allows us to control our internet. But he can get around everything. He resets things. He's an absolute nightmare. He's quite clever what he can do.
How do they? Because I've got a 12-year-old, and I know exactly everything you've just said and recognise every bit of it. I don't know. I mean, it's a naive question. Where do they learn this stuff? Well, from each other. Somebody passes it down to an older brother. They pass it down to a younger. It is quite extraordinary how kids. A friend of mine found that with social media, that his daughter. This is a couple of years ago now. She's a little older, but no matter what he did, somehow she found a way through it.
Yeah. Well, especially with ChatGPT now. I mean, you can ask it anything and it'll tell you how to get around it if you can do. But I think once there's a little window in, I mean, it's pretty much impossible to hide all passwords from your children nowadays. Because at times they might grab your phone, they might do it, and that's it. They work out their angles in. I've had to reset all of my router passwords, everything. When it can be quite fun, do all sorts of things. And I just don't think that's the way around it. I think the way around it is actually to stop companies being allowed to give our children crack cocaine. And be allowed to give it.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, my little boy, this is, again, a parental thing, but this doesn't happen every day. But he was on YouTube, not YouTube Kids, on YouTube, and he wasn't looking at anything. He was looking at the funny stuff, and that's what it was serving him up. And we couldn't work out how he'd got onto it. It didn't make any sense. But what he'd done, he'd gone to my other half's phone, and when you can click allow another 15 minutes or allow an hour, that kind of thing, he'd clicked that. He logged into her phone because he knew her password, and he just literally allowed himself extra time to have a little look.
He'll start to lock you out, and he'll start to get.
He's probably changed. He's probably He's probably got the phone at school with him now. He's probably owns it now.
Yeah, this is it. But this is the thing. I think by you're just going to teach children to try and work around a problem.
Yeah.
Instead of actually going to these companies, and we know we're in an age now with technology where you can do anything you want. They can definitely stop, and they can even set limits. They know what they're doing to these kids' brains. They know how they can't watch a film now for more than 15, 20 minutes because they're constantly want that next thing. Their brains are blind, and I feel sorry now for the children that are growing up because the parents are addicted. So I saw a boy the other day playing football, telling his dad off for checking his phone every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just not right.
It's a really good point. Well, you're meant to be watching your kid playing football. Great points, Joe. Thank you very much indeed for that. Do we just roll over and go, do you know what? The public appetite now, it's a different phase. Once upon a time, we went through the hunting period where humans realised that if they went out with a big spear, they could kill something with a spear and take it home and cook it. That was a distinct era, and all sorts of things came from that. That was a positive thing for, humans to continue. We went through all sorts of revolutions, political and otherwise. I always say the printing press was one of the great, most liberating inventions of our time, really. It allowed, prior to that, you just had sort of preaching half-wits telling you that God was going to burn you alive if you didn't do what he or she said. It would have been, of course, back then. Then the printing press came along. It allowed information to be shared, and people could suddenly make their own minds up about stuff. So we've gone through different evolutions. Is social media just an evolution? Is it just a phase? I think it comes down to taste, doesn't it? The doom scrolling thing is another part of it because it's the addiction of it. But the stuff the things we're worried about kids seeing. You know, when somebody makes a self-harm video that isn't a picture or a video of a young girl in a bedroom, distressed and crying her eyes out and doing something and self-harming herself, it's not that. It's an image that has been made like a beautiful kind of filtered video of a girl laying in a field. There's nice music being played. It's been fetishized to the point that it's like quite cool. Someone's made that deliberately. For what reason? Who knows who lives among us. So that's kind of weird stuff, isn't it? And we know there are many examples out there of children who took their own life, and that was encouraged, not least because of their journey into social media. Joe is in Bournemouth. Joe, what have you got for us? Hi. Oh, in fact, we went to Joe. Oh, he was still... All right, OK. Thank you, Joe. Anyway, he's gone. I thought Joe had long gone. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Before we go back to the calls, don't go away, Christian, with you in a second. We've got the voice of doom. I can't remember where we're at. Is it day 1, 2? Day two. Oh, yes, now I remember it. Day 2, voice of doom, very simple. It's a mystery voice, but it's political. You've got to essentially tell us who you think it is. There could be young, old, male, female, dead or alive, left wing or right wing. Who is this?
Almost at an all-time high.
Let's hear that again.
Almost at an all-time high.
And again.
Almost at an all-time high.
almost at an all-time high. Wasn't all-time high the theme of a Bond movie called Octopussy? Was that the theme? Was it? I don't know where that came from. 1983. Wow, I was only 2. What about that? Composed by John Barry, sung by Rita Coolidge. Lyrics by Tim Rice, didn't know that. Anyway, we've completely digressed down a James Bond factoid tunnel. Who is this?
Almost at an all-time high.
I've now got that Bond theme in my head. If you think you know who that is, 87222. 87222 is where you will find us. If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news at 3. Now, some breaking news. The Solicitor General, Ellie Reeves, has referred the sentence of Vikram Digwa, the killer of student Henry Novak, to the Court of Appeal under the unduly lenient scheme, saying the case horrified me. It isn't really for the Solicitor General to give her personal opinions in that sense, but I think Digwa got, was it 21 years, I think, from memory, for Henry's horrendous killing. Yeah, I would easily argue that it should be much more than that. Let's go back to it and your calls. Christian in Worcester. Christian, social media, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Yeah, great show as usual.
Thank you. Very kind. Fire away.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it was just with the social media ban. I'm sort of thinking to turn it on its head because I guess that adults or over 16s will have to verify their identity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more about confirming ID for adults rather than protection of children.
So, well, you think it ultimately will come down to that we have to verify, because everybody has to verify?
Correct.
Mm.
I think it's more about heading towards digital ID rather than protection of children.
Yeah. Because that would be, I mean, I don't know what the counter-argument to that is. I suppose that it would be, well, digital ID's coming anyway, so does it matter?
No, well,
I think it does matter, by the way, but that would be... those that work in digital ID would say, well, who cares? It doesn't matter how you use it, because it's coming anyway, so it'll just become the way you ID yourself.
Yeah, I'm not a user of social media, but purposely. But I just think it's another method through the back door of gaining citizens' ID.
Well, also the other thing, of course, it could potentially, and this does sound a bit tinfoil hat stuff, Christian, but potentially it would, when you give your ID, so is there a database of what I'm looking at? Are they going to say, oh, this guy seems to be looking at a disproportionate amount of Rupert Lowe videos, so we better keep our eye on him in case he's some kind of dodgy right-winger? Are we going to get into that territory?
Exactly, that's the way it's going to go. It's a complete state monitoring, I believe, or the start of complete.
The start of it, yeah. I get it, Christian. Thank you, mate, for that. Great call. This one's from Andrew in Hertfordshire. Andrew, how you doing?
Really good. Nice to see you. Based on last week's, how is my lefty friend?
Yeah, very well, apparently.
That's a parent's responsibility. You give the child a phone.
Yep.
Everything they go on social media, they make you a friend and you monitor what they say. If they don't play by the rules, or if things that are sent to them that are wrong, you as the parent have the responsibility, not the state. And the reason he's announcing this is because it takes the focus off the rest of the week. And there's not a parent out there who would rather have no houses of multiple occupancy in their street instead of this ban. It's nothing. It's worthless. If you want to solve it, go to the providers like Vodafone, EE, say, right, only people that have got a verified credit check, i.e. a credit card or a debit card, can own a phone. That's the way to do it.
That would, I mean, I can see the arguments pouring in, though, Andrew, and people go, well, what about if you're you're a lower earner, you haven't got a great credit reference, but you can buy a nice pay-as-you-go model because it works?
then okay.
I mean, you usually have to have some kind of system to pay for it, obviously.
You'd have to verify it. You'd have to verify it with your social service to show that you were over 16. So let's not. The majority of people would fall under it. There would be some that didn't, and we would find a way of managing that. But at the moment, anyone can get one. And the responsibility for what your child's viewing and seeing twice a week, sit them down, look at it, look what messages they're doing, understand it. It's your responsibility, not anybody else's. And if the child doesn't play ball, take the phone off of them.
Well, that is generally that's the obvious answer, isn't it? You're the parent, take the phone off them. So you then get into the peer pressure arguments of your child goes to school, they're the only person that isn't allowed X, Y, Z. They won't be the only person, but they think they are, etc. That isn't an insignificant experience as a parent, as I'm sure you know, Andrew.
Yeah, but if you're getting that experience as a child, that's because you didn't use the tool in the way it was designed. Personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Reality is...
Go on.
Yeah, I've lived through this. I did 2 weeks. The world was falling in. But at the end of it, we all agreed, and Wi-Fi in your house, change the code every week.
Yeah.
Keep the children on their toes. Don't let their dictate to you.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. And I think on paper, nobody would really disagree with that. Andrew, thank you very much indeed. I know that many parents will struggle sometimes with the implementation of that. And certainly kids and social media. My little boy said to me, I mean, by coincidence, can I have Snapchat? He didn't know this debate was, or this announcement was coming today. He must have been chatting, I think, with his cousin, who's older, and she has Snapchat. And he said, it's just a way we talk to each other, apparently. He doesn't use it, he's not on it, but that's the way kids define it, most kids. But, of course, it can be used for other more nefarious means, and there are the problems, and the addiction quality of it. We've got the voice of doom coming up. Who is this?
Almost at an all-time high.
87222. Here's the news.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon. Yeah, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. So, Keir Starmer, as you've been hearing, has made that big announcement to raise the minimum social media age to 16. This will be enforced through facial recognition and digital ID checks, although in what form we haven't fully heard. Though many have already dismissed this, saying it's unlikely that it will work given the widespread use of VPNs, which for the uninitiated will simply block where you are, and you could be in Holland or whatever, so it wouldn't apply to you. More on that. Some great calls as well coming through. Do you support the social media ban? Your thoughts. Also, EV charging companies are threatening to pull 2 billion quid's worth of planned investment if Keir Starmer waters down net zero target, as the PM reportedly prepares to slash the 2030 EV sales mandate from 80% down to 50%, overruling his own energy secretary in the process. Look, if people aren't buying the cars in the numbers they first thought, then I don't know what else, in fairness, they can do. And the US and Iran have agreed a framework peace deal to be signed, with Trump announcing the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by the end of the week, and oil prices already tumbling nearly 5%, though experts do warn it could take months before supplies fully normalise. We'll have more on that in just a couple of moments' time. 0344 499 1000. No name given on this one. But it's about digital ID and social media. Regarding ID requirements for kids using phones, this could easily be undertaken by the phone shop. If someone looks underage, they would need to prove how old they are before a phone is unlocked at a phone shop. The form of ID check can be noted, a passport, driving licence, without a copy being taken. This would remove the well-founded concerns of digital ID. Thank you for that. So what is happening in Iran? Have we got peace in the Middle East? The US and Iran apparently have agreed a deal to end the war, with the Strait of Hormuz set to be opened by the end of the week, and the US naval blockade will be lifted. Now, oil prices already falling on the news, though Israel says its forces will remain in Lebanon regardless of what has been agreed. Let's speak with Patrick Coburn, Middle East correspondent. Patrick, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
There is a sort of I don't want to be pessimistic about this deliberately, but there is a bit of we've heard this before about it, isn't there? I don't know how many times a peace deal is about to be reached and implemented. Is this one any different?
Yeah, I really think it is, and I can understand why people are sort of browned off about hearing Trump saying, this is a deal practically every second day. But this is confirmed by the Iranians. It's confirmed by Pakistan and Qatar, who have been mediating. So I think this is the real McCoy that we're looking at, and it's a very important moment because Trump is committed to this. He seems to be intent on stopping Israel attacking in Lebanon. So I think we're looking at the real thing at the moment.
Isn't that the obvious pinch point here, that whatever has been made between the US and Iran, this issue of Lebanon is not merely, a slight hindrance. I mean, it could be pivotal in the peace deal falling apart within hours or days.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the two wars, so to speak, have joined up. The war in the Gulf between the US and Iran, and the war that Israel is waging in Lebanon, primarily against Hezbollah, the Shia paramilitary organization. And Israel obviously just doesn't like this agreement, didn't want the war with Iran to end, and would like to stop it. So yesterday we had suddenly an Israeli attack on Beirut, which Trump denounced pretty furiously and said he'd, which I'm sure is true, had rung up, talked to Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, and shouted obscenities at him and so forth. And I don't think a lot of Trump is theatre, but I don't think this is theatre. I think this is, he really wants this. So I think it'll be very difficult for Israel to stand in the way. Israel can't really do anything in the Middle East without US backing.
True.
And so I think that although there'll be a lot of difficulties from Israel, they'll drag their feet, they'll do this, they'll do that. I think at the end of the day, they'll have to go along with what Trump wants, which is what Trump himself says.
It's interesting, isn't it, where this this endeavour has taken us. If you go back to the end of February when America and Israel first dropped some pretty sizable munitions onto Iran, the idea that there would have been peace talks between Iran and America would have been for the birds. I mean, this wasn't how it was going to work out, was it? This was Trump was going to go in there, he was going to smash the place up, the regime would either be killed or they'd leg it for the hills, the new guys would come in, there'd be almost a revolution overnight, and we would see a very different secular Iran form within a fortnight of that initial incursion. Certainly sitting around a table with these people would not have been something the President of the United States would have even, I mean, he would have laughed you out of he would have probably banned you from a press conference if you'd have even raised the idea.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what's so extraordinary about these developments, that what Trump and Netanyahu, what the US and Israel thought they were going to get out of this war just hasn't happened. They thought they'd get rid of the regime. That didn't happen. They thought that they could eliminate Iran's missiles. That hasn't happened. What has happened is that Iran has got control of the Strait of Hormuz, as we all know, and can sort of inflict an economic crisis on the world when it wants. 20% of oil and gas comes through the strait from the Gulf, but also the Arab oil states, you know, these quite important people like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates are all now sending emissaries to Iran. They don't want Iran as an enemy anymore. So Iran is, so to speak, a much bigger power, a bigger player, a bigger cheese in the region than it was before the war started.
Well, indeed,
Exactly
I've often wondered that about the power. Yes, I mean, the power, Patrick, sorry to interject, but the power of the Strait of Hormuz, I'm sort of surprised it wasn't, you know, I know it's not an entirely original area that Iran clearly knew the significance of it, but, I mean, the idea that the fact that it's so significant, pivotal in all of this, is something that almost sort of came later in the day, really.
Yeah, I think it's because people like me, in fact, have been saying, you know, if there's a war, the Iranians may close the Gulf of Hormuz, it'll have a tremendous effect on the world.
Yeah.
But I've been saying that for about 25 years. It didn't happen. And one got sort of used to the idea, well, maybe it isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
The reason they didn't want it is that in Iran was that they didn't want a war with the US and Israel, which they thought would follow if they closed the Strait of Hormuz. Then, without wanting it, they did get a war with the US and Israel, so that obstacle to closing the Strait of Hormuz disappeared. That said, I think that they're pretty surprised themselves at just how much impact it had. I think they're surprised also. These places like Dubai and so forth are proved to be so vulnerable to missiles and drones being fired at them.
Yeah, you don't really need a nuclear capability when you've got the Strait of Hormuz. I heard somebody say recently, and I guess there's sort of something in that.
Oh, yeah, they're dead right. I mean, you know, in a sense, the Iranians had a nuclear option in the sense of a really powerful weapon all along, which they didn't use. While all this business about their enriched uranium and what they were going to do with it and so forth, you know, it would seem like a threat, you know, could present it as a threat, but didn't actually have a bomb. So it's a bit like sort of threatening somebody with an unloaded gun.
Yeah.
But they did actually have a loaded gun in the Strait of Hormuz, although they may not have quite appreciated it, and maybe the rest of the world did. But now they've discovered it, and they're not going to let go of that. And you can see that happening. I mean, the United Arab Emirates, which really they don't like the Iranians, but they've been giving them a lot of money recently, we've learned over the last few days. So there is a real change in the balance of power there.
Final point, Patrick, and look, how long's a piece of string, etc. But what is your assessment of what this will mean going forward? Very easy. I say easy. Very easy to say. You've got a peace deal, but of course the real authenticity of that deal is not in what it looks like on the piece of paper tomorrow, is what it looks like 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, I mean, various important things are going to happen. The Strait's going to open, the Americans will end their blockade and so forth. And then there'll be very prolonged negotiations, probably pretty messy. Crucial thing, will the war resume? Can't tell at this moment. But, you know, there's going to be plenty of friction. But what one can say is that, you know, after this war in which most people thought that Iran would lose. You know, they've suffered a lot of dead, they've been squeezed, but actually they're emerging from this war stronger than they were before, which is really a pretty extraordinary development.
Patrick, on that point, lovely to have you on again. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Patrick Coburn, Middle East correspondent. I mean, it's kind of strange that after so much devastation, you say, well, there's some good news. It's like, well, what does that look like going forward if you have kind of like pretty much the same regime, some really significant names and figures in that regime, still in charge of Iran? I mean, that was really not what we were told was going to happen, not what we were told was the intention. But that looks like the upshot, with maybe a slightly lesser chance that they ever monkey around with any kind of nuclear intentions or ambitions, which I think was obliterated a year before anyway. But they carried on saying it, much like Saddam told the world, yeah, I've got weapons of mass destruction, I can annihilate all of you. You know, you said that out loud many, many times. 0344 499 1000. Wendy says, I thought Keir Starmer wanted the youth vote. You can imagine the conversations. Kid, Mum, I want TikTok. Mum, don't blame me, love. Keir Starmer's fault. Kid, I hate him. Yep, another genius idea from Keir. Love that, Wendy, thank you. Let's go to Maria in Gloucestershire on this one. Social media, Maria, where are you on this?
I'm mixed at the moment, but I just wanted to tell you about, I had a little conversation with a 15-year-old today who comes to see me now and again. And I said to her, what do you think about it? She said, it's rubbish. She said, we've already sort of like got ourselves organised.
Wow.
She said, yeah. She said, they obviously, we use a VPN anyway, even now. Right. And sometimes they use the incognito window. I didn't even know what that was on Google. And she said the one thing that we very rarely use in her with her friends is X, because they don't trust it, and TikTok. And she said what they're going to do now, because they use Snapchat a lot, and they stay in a lot, don't they, kids at night? She said the reason why we're staying in and we talk to our friends on Snapchat is because we don't feel it's safe for us to go out to meet them.
Wow.
And you know what? Yeah, wow. And I thought, wow. I never thought of that, because where they go to meet would be in parks and things. Because where we are...
So there is in the experience of the 15-year-old you were speaking to, that was their... that's how they kind of look at it. Because I can't think of... When I look back to... I obviously wasn't around when I was that age. And I mean, the idea that you would sit at home and there'd be... How many of you... Finn, how many could you get in a chat at any one time on Snapchat? Because it's not endless.
You can chat all the time. It's endless.
You can chat for a long time, but you could have 10, 12 people chatting away. When I was 15, 200 apparently. You can have 200 chatting away. I mean, I didn't know 200 people. I didn't want to know 200 people. I didn't want to know more than about 2. So I don't know what the heck you talk about.
Yeah, I do, but this is...
But that's just an age thing, me saying that, right?
Well, that is an age thing, I think.
Yeah. Don't have to agree with me, Maria.
No, I'm not agreeing with you, really. I think you look a lot younger than...
Thank you,
how old
darling.
are you? 93?
94. Great answer.
Right, though, isn't it? It made me think.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
no, but I mean, I guess when I see somebody, I know this is definitely through the prism of an older person, but when I see a mate's teenager on their phone, and they're clearly just chatting, I don't know what they're on, and I'm just thinking, what do you have to chat? I genuinely don't understand it. When I was 15, I was kind of quite prepared for somebody to tell me I was a vacuous tool with no opinions and somebody that shouldn't be listened to. I was up for that because I thought, well, I'm 15, that's part of the gig, isn't it? I'm of no use to anybody.
Actually, what they're talking about is they're breaking up for school now, and a lot of them are going on to college.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. When you get to sort of 15, I mean, that's a game changer. Big difference between being 12 and 15, obviously, apart from 3 years. Yeah, no, I get it. Maria, thank you. Lovely call. Really enjoyed that. I will always come back to that. What are you talking about? What could be that important? What is it? I think the other problem on the bullying side of it, and certainly Faith, one of our producers, was saying before the show, that when she was at school, it wasn't unusual for somebody just to set up an Instagram page called Gemma is a bitch. That could just be set up, and then loads of people would pile in. Now, poor old Gemma, if that was me as a kid, and I'd seen somebody set something up like that, and I'd probably speak for most teenagers, but some would be more acutely vulnerable and be affected by it. I think that would be a horror show for a kid. I mean, that could be the difference between a child never, ever going to school again, if that was the sort of thing. And that kind of thing. So, you know, bullying is not left at the school gate. Not that that was good anyway, but that's where kids were fearful of going to school because it might start again. Now, it's a fear of just turning your phone on or going to a certain page. Oh, look, someone started a Facebook group. It wouldn't be Facebook maybe with that age group, but you take the point. About me. I'm a horror show. We don't know who started it because it's anonymous, but it's out there. And now everybody's talking about it. And you've got WhatsApp groups that have got 300 kids on them. I mean, how is that even possible? It's interesting that since we've been on air, I have received an email from my kids' school saying that they're going to, I mean, some schools already do this, but from the start of the new year, except a new academic year, students will not be permitted to carry mobile phones with them during the school day. Phones brought into school must be switched off, placed in lockers as soon as the student enters the school grounds. Phones will remain in the student's locker until they leave at the end of the day. This includes devices that are connected to Wi-Fi or can operate a phone signal. Now, that's not a coincidence, is it, that that's come out today? That has to be connected to that. Because before, I mean, that's a rule that's quite common in some schools. The only difference I would imagine is that if they didn't have that rule, which his school clearly didn't, they do for years 7, 8 and 9, they have that rule, but they didn't have it for the older ones, as I remember. So kids of my kids' age are already doing this. But I would imagine if you went on social media then, on school grounds, then that's different, isn't it? Because then the kid is breaking the law on school grounds. Would that be the game changer there? I don't know. I'm thinking aloud. But certainly it seems to have come at an interestingly coincidental time. 0344 499 1000. Let's just quickly do the voice of doom. Have we got a winner? This is the voice we played you about 30 minutes ago.
Almost at an all-time high.
These are some of the guesses. Tony Blair, no. Lenny Henry, no. Chuka Anuma, no. Remember him. Luke Taylor, it is not. Ed Miliband, no. Norman Lamont, it is not. Matt Hancock, no. Tobias Elwood, no. Can we hear it again, Amy?
Almost at an all-time high.
Karen in the New Forest, bang on, spot on, former Home Secretary. Sajid Javid, I thought that was quite easy, actually, from day one, although this is only day 2. But, yeah, Sajid Javid, former Home Secretary, and, of course, he was one of the crucial components in stepping down from... God, we've had so many Prime Ministers. Boris Johnson's administration, wasn't it? Is it Boris Johnson's? Rishi Sunak's? Boris Johnson's? Man alive, I've lost... We've had Liz Truss, we've had so... They've been all... one a week, Prime Minister. We've had 57 in the last couple of years. So, yes, he... key member of the Conservative administration. That was the right answer. It means we have a brand new Voice of Doom tomorrow right here on Talk. It's 20 minutes after 3 and we're back with more of your calls after this.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This on social media from Estone, who says, I don't get it. My kid's phone is locked down. It's pretty simple through Google. I authorise pretty much everything she does if it isn't within the limits I've set. Sure, as she gets older, she might learn to work around it, but it's not hard to take the phone off her. And that's ultimately it, isn't it? But of course, it's not just that. I mean, we're talking about the phone. If you get into the, as somebody mentioned earlier, the gaming world, that's a whole different ball game as well. Just on an iPad where, you see, they don't see YouTube and something like that is just seen as kind of, that's the default place you go. It's like eating, you know, a takeaway. It's like takeaway. It's just disposable and it's fun and they can do it for hours. I'm not sure what you get from that. You can, when I say lose your child, I mean, you can certainly, that they would happily sit in a room watching YouTube, also simultaneously gaming as well, and they would happily do that all night. And what's interesting, when people say, well, it's just a new way that kids entertain themselves, I don't think you'd get a kid playing Lego all night, every single day. I genuinely don't think you would. They like, you know, my kid loves it every now and again, likes a bit of Lego. But if I said you're going to do it for 5 hours every night, for the next year, that would be ridiculous. But if I said you're going to be able to game for 5 hours every night, that literally would happen without any problem at all. So something in terms of what stimulates your brain and what stimulates your pastime and your interest and everything, something different happens in that world that doesn't happen in the physical world. I know I'm not reinventing the wheel by saying that, but it is rather interesting. There are very few things you could guarantee a child would do for a period of time. But scrolling, gaming is absolutely one of them. Grace is down in London. What are you making of this, Grace? Good afternoon.
Hi. I can't help but feel like this is being presumed to be too much of a panacea. I think that it's obviously the case that there's a lot about social media that's very harmful and addictive. But the way that this ban is being discussed, it just sounds a little bit to me as though Starmer thinks this is going to resolve a multitude of problems that teenagers experience, and I'm just not quite sure
I think you're right. And I mean, the way the kind of the sort of, I don't want to say fanfare, that sort of slightly overstates it, but the surety with which he made this announcement was felt to me. I know he's the Prime Minister, and there's no point in him coming up with a policy and not sounding sure about it. He's got to obviously give it something. But our nearest example is Australia, and they've already said, look, at the moment, the early signs are, well, it might be for the youngest of the teenagers and under 16s, it's working, but there's a whole group, I think 60%, where it isn't working.
Yeah, and that there are some things online which are really positive. I mean, YouTube gets included sometimes as a social media outlet because there's plenty on it that can be considered social media conversation in comment sections, and there's some content on it that's really harmful. But when I was a teenager, I was watching on YouTube debate between academics regarding the existence of God, and that led me to conclude that God exists. But I was also looking at educational videos that were really helpful with revising for school. There are other things on YouTube which are helping people to learn life skills. There are things on social media that help people who are lonely to find friends. And while, again, there's plenty that's really harmful, I kind of feel like oversimplifying and presuming it ought to be bad and that we'll fix a lot of problems by getting rid of it might not be entirely accurate. There really needs to be a bit more nuanced discussion. I think this about kids as screens as well. When people are talking about kids using screens too much, I'm thinking, well, what matters is what's on the screen, really, because not you specifically, but some people moan about the BBC relentlessly, and there's a lot about the BBC that I disagree with, but the BBC does produce some children's content, including revision materials, that's really informative.
Yeah, so I think it's almost the only thing they should be allowed to produce, frankly, shows for 5-year-olds.
More so than when I was a child. There's stuff like number blocks and all kinds of things. But when I was in my GCSE year, I found BBC Bite Size massively helpful when I was stopped from going to school because doctors thought I was too unwell and I was doing loads of Bite Size revision. Sure. So I think what kids are doing online, it kind of depends on what the content is. And I also think that it's really great for kids to be able to talk with their parents openly if they do see something that's unsettling. And I kind of worry that if you try to ban things, that might make kids feel all the more inclined to hide from their parents when they have come across something unsettling, when it should be actually that they talk about it with their parents instead.
It's an absolute wise point, Grace, and you're absolutely bang on as well about the positive potential of so many elements of social media, YouTube and the like. Grace, thank you very much indeed for that. And by the way, if you want to see, I think I'm right in saying, Christopher Hitchens, who was an atheist, so Grace, I don't think you would concur. Are you familiar with his work?
I am well aware of who Christopher Hitchens is. Yes.
Okay. Well, he's not on everybody's kind of radar. As there's a great debate between him and Tony Blair. I don't know if you've seen it. It's worth looking at.
No, I'll look that up.
And it may well be. It might have been in somewhere like Canada. I can't remember. Blair wasn't in office at the time, but Blair obviously is a Christian. I know some people struggle with that, but he is. And Christopher Hitchens was very much the antithesis of that. It's definitely worth a look because they are both very good and very persuasive speakers in their own rights. Grace, thank you very much indeed for that. Mag says, years ago, our entertainment and interest was a game of drafts or snakes and ladders and then the Rubik's Cube or the Billy Cotton band show. I still have a Nokia 3310. Wow. Do you know what, Mags? That message you've just sent us, do you have any idea how beautiful that would look on a smartphone compared to a flipping Nokia 3310? Which is fine, by the way, because you plug it in and the charge lasts for about 10 weeks. But I think I do remember a point, not that I went directly from a Nokia to a smartphone, but then, you know, Nokia to a Sony, you know, the flip phone thing, which they did bring back again, well, that kind of thing. But it's not, it's not anything you need, because Mags, like a lot of people, have gone, I don't actually need it, so why would I get it? Snakes and ladders. You can still whip out snakes and ladders in our house and get half an hour out of them, especially the young one. He will play it. He doesn't he is, I mean, genuinely offended when he goes down a snake. Often calling for a referee's decision on it. No, I didn't really roll that because it's my birthday soon, so I shouldn't go down a snake. He's got all sorts of logic. I did spot this story yesterday, by the way, young people in China turning to virtual parents to get praise and encouragement that they're missing at home. And that story only just sort of appeared, just gradually, but nothing big was made of it. But in the wake of this conversation, that's quite sad, that young kids are turning to virtual parents. And I guess, you know, I don't know, chat rooms and messaging boards and different messaging services, whether they're on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, wherever they are forming some sort of, you know, community and hub. Again, notwithstanding the fact that I have no flipping idea what a bunch of 14-year-olds talk about for that length. I genuinely do not know. I honestly, and I speak from experience because I was 14, all right? I had nothing to say. I had no opinions with any validity because I was 14, therefore I was part moron, part weirdo, all right? That just goes with the territory. All sorts of things were growing and changing. My voice suddenly sounded a bit more like this than the slightly kind of weird Aled Jones creature that I was before. I had some spots on my face and stuff. What did I have to bring to the flipping party? Who wants to listen to me, for goodness sake? Spotbag McDougal with his thoughts and opinions. And I thought that about other kids, really. So I liked meeting with my mates because I was a very sociable kid and I had a little circle of mates, like most kids do. But what I would talk about on a massive sort of chat room or any kind of format, messaging format, with so many, I do not know. I do not know. Look, I get it, times change. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. Lots to talk about here. This from Chris in the Southwest, who says, or is it Chris Southwest? Said instead of banning social media for under 16s, they need to ban smartphones, not social media. Easier to police, cheaper for the parents, and the parents are still able to contact their kids. And in today's climate, isn't a bad idea. Yeah, that sounds like a fair point. There's so many fair points around this. The bit that I still can't fathom is why Keir Starmer thinks that the only part of the internet that is worthy of a bit of scrutiny is social media. Because if part of the argument is about taste and decency, then there is this other thing called the internet and search engines. You can find all sorts of malarkey of all flavours and types, and quite a lot of it is beyond disturbing, and that ain't got anything to do with social media. Alan's in Norfolk. Alan, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian.
Hello.
Yeah, I guess this is a difficult one. I think most people generally support this kind of approach. However, I think realistically, you kind of got to look at, is it really going to be successful? How can it be delivered? How can it be executed? I was only reading yesterday that in Australia, where I think they have the ban, they've said it's been only very, very marginally successful because there are routes around it. I suppose if the only way I think it could work, and I don't know how governments would police this or how it could again be achieved, is really make it punitive for companies that provide these services to not have adequate controls in place to stop a lot of the content that's available.
The trouble is, of course, as somebody suggested earlier, that if your kid was found with a bottle of whiskey, then you would be culpable, right? If your 10-year-old was drinking, you'd be taken to court as a parent for neglect of some sort. That somebody suggested we need to take social media into that place, so parents can't just go, oh, don't worry, he's got a VPN, it keeps him happy. Now, I don't know, is that a good idea or a bad idea? Or do you sort of do like when you start to, prohibition, that things start to go underground?
Well, this is it. And I think the thing is, just because, a lot of things are banned, or restricted, speed limits, buying alcohol, buying cigarettes, but people get around it. And, and it's all right banning something, but it's how do you police it? How do you enforce it? And the thing is that, in my mind, one of the only ways you do it is to hit these companies in the pocket. So, in a way, you kind of almost get into a tariff thing where you say, well, if Apple or Amazon or Google won't, or YouTube won't, police or at least control their content better, that's assuming they can, that we slap, if you buy an iPhone in the UK, until you come in line, we're going to slap a 50% tariff on it and dissuade people from buying things. But then equally, legitimate consumers bear the brunt of that. And I just think, I don't disagree with the approach of protecting kids, but I think I would argue some of these platforms are not where they, and you just said it before I came on the line. There's a lot of other stuff on the internet that's accessible that is completely, most people would not want to view it, but I don't know. I think it's fine saying all of this, but how are you going to execute?
Well, that's it. And yes, and if we talk in 2 years' time, Alan, we'll be talking as if we live in a world where teenagers don't access social media. And I, for some reason, instinctively don't feel that's the place we're likely to be in. Listen, I've got to move. Alan, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Alan in Norfolk, thank you to him. I want to move to this story as well. If you clocked this over the weekend, Switzerland had a bit of a vote on whether there should be a population cap on the country. There was a sort of right-wing contingent to this initiation of this discussion, but it was rejected. Rejected as, nope, we don't want that. So 55% of people were kind of looking at this thinking, this is not the way we want the country to go. What's behind this? And let's talk more with Oliver Moody, who's the Berlin correspondent for The Times, also covers other areas of Europe as well. Oliver, good afternoon to you. So this is, the Swiss system is very different to ours. They can throw in these referenda from time to time. That's broadly how this would have come around, right?
Yeah, when Brexit happened, the Europeans would often hold up Switzerland as an example of how you can mix representative parliamentary democracy with direct democracy. They've been doing this since 1891. And the idea is that it gives the people a way of telling the ruling elites that they're getting it wrong.
And they're able to do this with, they don't have one every week, but they have, they can have a few a year, right?
They have plenty, and in fact, on Sunday alone, there were 2 different ones, and there have been, I think, about 42 on migration over the last century and a half.
Wow. So this area is not entirely new. I thought it was a really interesting question, though, because this wasn't about, shall we leave some arrangement or block. It wasn't about should we stop people coming into the country or kick people out of the country, rather. It was a rather sort of, I don't know, a more polite way, if that's the right way to put it, of looking at immigration. Should we have a ceiling on the population cap?
Well, it was all of those things, right? So Switzerland's population has grown extremely rapidly. 30 years ago, it was 7 million. Now it's above 9. And so they would say at 9.5, we're going to massively restrict asylum, we're going to restrict family reunification, and we're going to renegotiate the free movement deal that we have with the European Union. And at 10, we'd pull out of every single international agreement that encourages migration. So those would be pretty radical and stiff policy measures in their own right.
This was the Swiss People's Party, which, of course, as for those who didn't know, is a more right-wing party. Interesting, though, when people reject something, I mean, that is democracy. But what, as far as you can tell, Oliver, were the kind of arguments around it? Was it the latter of what you talked about, pulling out of agreements that carried with it some other knock-on effect that might not be good for the economy, or was it literally the Swiss people's love of a growing population?
Well, what was driving the referendum, and is still very much there in large parts of the Swiss population, is this thing they call Dichtestress, density stress, which is basically the sense that housing, public transport, public services have become under massive, massive strain as a result of this population growth. That is an undeniable objective fact. And that is a concern that's still shared by a majority of the Swiss population. What held them back in this referendum, above all else, I think, was the sense that this was analogous to Brexit, and this would be such a profound rupture in Sweden's relationship with the European Union that it would have all kinds of unforeseen economic consequences further down the line. So in a sense, you could say it was Project Fear that carried the day in the end. Will it make any difference? I know the head of Switzerland's main business lobby said that this is still, more than 40% of people backing this cap. This is still, I think the quote was, a yellow card to our politicians. So does that, I mean, OK, they didn't win, but there is still, they would be able to argue that a sizable number of Swiss people feel this way. Will that make any difference to the way Switzerland is run? I think it will. If you go back to 2014, they had another similar referendum on migration quotas, which was passed by the public and then watered down dramatically by the government because the EU told them that it wouldn't wash. This time, I think we've had another very strong signal from the Swiss public that even if not quite a majority of them are in favour of these very drastic measures, a lot of them are still very worried about it. And the message from politicians of all stripes going through to the kind of centre-left almost has been that they can't just ignore it and brush it under the carpet a second time, that they are going to have to restrict particularly irregular or illegal migration more strongly than they have in the past. So it was kind of a warning shot, for want of a better word. I mean, it was said by some that they lost the vote, but they won the battle of ideas. Is that fair? I don't know about that, because for the SVP, the Swiss People's Party, this was very much about reframing Switzerland's relationship with the EU and cutting off free movement. And a majority of the Swiss have very clearly said no to that. That said, in terms of demonstrating that this is a very real issue that cannot be ignored, I think that you could say they have succeeded in that mission for sure. When I was looking at this, I was thinking, well, if somebody comes up with a population ceiling, intellectually, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, people will have their own reasons. If somebody says, "Oh, we've done this because we don't like brown people" or something, we can argue that's a nefarious argument. But if somebody is literally just saying, "We're a country this big, our economy has always thrived in this way," that dynamic can only function with X amount of people in. If you put too many into the mix, then you simply completely change the financial economic structure of our entire system. So that's not an unreasonable argument. I mean, I think what speaks in favour of your analysis more than anything else is that the people who would have been affected by this population cap, above all others, are not non-Europeans. They are Germans and Italians and the French, who are by far the largest national groups that move to Switzerland. Right. And Switzerland is now home to the largest number of German expats anywhere on the planet.
Wow.
And
Makes sense,
so
but
this was very much about limiting migration from neighbouring EU states. The point where it stops being an abstract question is when you look at the kind of measures that you're actually required to get you to a population cap. And those include potentially telling the Swiss who are living abroad, well, you can't come home now because we've reached the population cap and we can't take any more people, or pulling out of the European Convention on Human Rights or various UN treaties. And at that point, it does start to get very ideological.
Yeah, I would imagine it's like anything. Asking a simple question is the easy, but being able to implement that is fraught with bear traps and landmines all over the place. Interesting nonetheless, and you know, as you said, Oliver, there throughout the previous answer, it will nonetheless re-engage the conversation about immigration, and future political parties would be mindful of that, I would have thought, when they're standing for election locally or otherwise.
Well, what it really does, there's a parliamentary election coming up in Switzerland next year. The Swiss People's Party, already the largest party on about 30% of the vote, they're the only political party that really strongly identified themselves with this initiative, right? So if they are capable of mobilising 45% of the electorate for this kind of thing, then it does suggest that Switzerland may take a pretty strong political turn to the right next year.
Oliver, thank you for your time, sir. Really interesting. Oliver Moody, Berlin correspondent for The Times and The Sunday Times, covering all associated countries in that neck of the woods as well. I think that's genuinely fascinating. I'm surprised that didn't make much bigger news, frankly, not least because it's interesting that a country just had a referendum on whether you put a cap on the population. That in itself is fascinating. But the further implications going forward, and I think what he said there about the Swiss People's Party, who are in a very powerful position, if they were getting 40% on this, by the way, the turnout for this was about 60%, which I thought would be higher, bearing in mind what's at stake, but that's what it was. And 40% of people have said, we want a population cap. That will absolutely inform any election, whether it's a local council election or a national one over there in Switzerland. Thank you to Oliver. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back with more of your calls next on Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one in from Craig, North Yorkshire, who says, Ian, this ban does not go nearly far enough. Social media is toxic for you people. I see the damage every day for young people, I think I should say. See the damage every day as a teacher, but it's the addictive nature of the phone that is the issue. Children are neurologically being changed in a significant way and not for the better. We need seismic societal changes to stem and reverse the damage. Parents are just as bad as kids, I promise you. And what's interesting, and I find that fascinating, because it comes from a teacher who sees kids, and perhaps Craig has seen different generations of kids that function differently. But if you speak to, in fact, we had a paediatrician on with us last week, so the medical world have spotted differences. Concentration spans being the obvious one, social interaction being another one, a sort of fairly insular character that has been allowed to grow rather than flourish in one direction, has kind of gone into a more solitary one where it might not have done that. So that, yeah, I mean, you know, this isn't just a case of little Toby monkeying around with some mates on Snapchat. There's a bit more to it than that. I get that. Andy's in Telford. Andy, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah, hi there.
Hello.
Great show.
Thank you, mate.
Enjoy. Love listening to Talk all day long.
Yeah.
I just wanted to have a quick talk about the this sort of restriction that they're looking at putting on under 16-year-olds for social media. The problem is, it's going to be everybody that they're going to have to check, but it's going to be anything that's connected to the internet. Absolutely anything.
Yeah.
It's not just a mobile phone. I don't think people are really taking this, you know, and understanding exactly what it is.
Do you mean in terms of... Right. So you're saying that other parts of the internet will also be subject to sort of government scrutiny?
Well, yeah, there's obviously going to be some scope creep, but it's any equipment you have. It's tablets, it's computers, it's your phone, it's gaming consoles, it's your smart TV. It's going to be everything.
I mean, to a degree, it kind of already is, isn't it? Just not through a kind of one-size-fits-all portal or mechanism.
Yeah, but it's just a way to bring in digital ID. You know, you got this nutcase Kermit Starman, and he's sort of forcing this upon us, but he's banning some social media, but not all social media.
Yeah, but not all of it. I mean, so those that... Because I get what you say about the digital ID, but the government would go, well, that's coming in anyway. We don't need to use this.
But it shouldn't be coming in, should it?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with that point. But I don't think Starmer would hide... You know, they're very big supporters of digital ID. They think it's a fantastic thing. So I don't think he would need to hide that. If you said to him in the press conference, Prime Minister, is this just a way to bring in digital ID? He would go, no, because that's coming in anyway.
No, I think he's a little bit more underhanded than that.
Well, it could be. My worry on this, to be honest, Andy, is that it doesn't really... If it's about taste and decency, which we're told it is, to a degree, it's also about addiction. I know, I understand that. I don't know anybody. If I said to you now, Andy, do you think it's good that 10-year-olds can watch graphic pornography and beheadings? I don't know anybody who would say, yeah, I think that's great. Nobody thinks that's good. But whether this is the way to do it is the big question.
And yeah, I totally agree with you, because you know, it is the Wild West on the internet.
Yeah.
They're just going to look elsewhere for that kind of content.
Well, I think that's rather the problem, isn't it? That content is literally available in so many other places than just social media. Andy, great call. Thank you, mate, for that. You get the final word, but the next word coming up right here on Talk is going to be that of Kevin O'Sullivan, and it looks like a packed old show. I'm just looking at the reams of research.
It's brilliant. It's just amazing. It's going to be the best show ever. I'll tell you, this is what really disturbs worries me about this social media ban for under 16s. I mean, there's several elements to it. I think it's hilarious. You know, Starmer knows he's going. This is his idea of a great legacy.
Yeah.
He bans. My legacy is I banned something. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. So I don't think it is the government.
Something badly thought through as well.
It's not the government's job to decide who should watch social media and who shouldn't. It's down to parents. I don't want mother government nanny stating us like this.
Mother Starmer.
So he can stick this diktat where the sun don't shine. But here's what really worries me about it. Surely it has to be. If it's to have any credibility at all, it has to be a blanket ban. What Keir Starmer has said is the platforms that tend to publish content that I don't like, with which I don't disagree, I'm banning them. But Blue Sky, which is full of opinions and worldviews that I agree with, I'm not banning them. It's purely political. It's a disgrace.
It is bizarre, isn't it, that the Blue Sky thing, which, by the way, I don't know anybody that uses that thing, but apparently
Lefties.
it's almost like the Karl Marx appreciation.